Chapter 897. Yili shook her head. There's no need. Ying has never accomplished anything in her entire life. But once she has made up her mind about something, it will be very difficult to get any real information from her. Rather than wasting time trying to verify it after she tells us, it's better to get her to say it willingly. Yaoji frowned, but if something happens to Glass City and the prince, Dongfang, you said that it's not someone important. Then it shouldn't be someone close to Xiao Yao. Even if Mo Jingli wants to use it, he won't be in a hurry. Eldest uncle and second uncle should be investigating as well. Yili said in a low voice. Yaoji thought that Prince Ding and Mr. Hong Yu were both extraordinary people. It would be very difficult for Dongfang Yu's people to scheme against them. Otherwise, how could they not even know that Infinite Boundless Mountain was in danger of extinction? Hearing Yi Li's words, Yaoji no longer paid attention to this matter. Looking at Yi Li, she asked, after Marquis Muyang dispatches his troops, what should Yaoji do? Young master, please instruct me. Yi Li looked at her deeply, sighing softly. Yaoji, you really don't have to force yourself like this. Yaoji nodded with a smile. Yaoji understands young master's meaning. Since Yaoji has already made her decision, I naturally won't spoil young master's and the Prince Ding Mansion's matters. Yi Li played with her fan absent-mindedly, thinking for a while before saying, since that's the case, when the Dechu state dispatches its troops, you can go with him. Yaoji frowned. I'm afraid Marquis Muyang won't agree. Other than the generals who had been stationed at the border for a long time, it was not allowed to bring along family members when marching to war. Moreover, she wasn't a woman like Princess Ding who was proficient in both the pen and the sword, able to strategize and command thousands of troops. It was impossible for Muyang to bring her along. Yi Li smiled. As long as Yaoji is willing, she will naturally think of a way. Yaoji was startled for a moment, then she smiled mildly. Yaoji understands. Thank you for your advice, young master. Young master Wei Lin requests an audience. Outside the door, Wei Lin said in a low voice. Yaoji and Qin Feng stood up. Qin Feng said, young master, I'll take my leave first. Yi Li nodded and said, you can follow Yaoji these days. As I said before, you are in charge of everything in Marquis Muyang's mansion. Qin Feng nodded. Qin Feng thanks young master. Yi Li said softly, going too far is as bad as falling short. You should understand what I mean. Qin Feng silently nodded, turned around and left with Yaoji. Wei Lin entered and did not even bother to greet him. He said in a low voice, reporting to young master, Dongfang Yu has left the residence. Yi Li's expression changed slightly. She stood up abruptly but quickly sat back down. She asked in a deep voice, she's alone. Wei Lin shook his head. He only brought 2 guards, both of whom are from Infinite Boundless Mountain. Yi Li lowered her brows and thought for a moment before saying, Dongfang Yu's martial arts are extraordinary. Don't get too close lest she discovers you. Wei Lin nodded. Young master, please be at ease. With our abilities, as long as we can determine the general location, we will definitely be able to find young master Qingchen. It's just that young master Qingchen doesn't even have the strength to truss up a chicken. I wonder. Yi Li waved her hands. Seeing Dongfang Yu's situation 2 days ago, she shouldn't have seen Big Brother. Big Brother shouldn't be in any danger. Wei Lin nodded. That Dongfang Yu is madly in love with young master Qingchen. She probably wouldn't harm him easily. Yi Li thought for a moment, then asked, have you investigated Infinite Boundless Mountain's influence in Jiangnan? Wei Lin said, after Infinite Boundless Mountain was destroyed, their influence in Jiangnan changed. However, there were still many clues left behind. We can follow the clues and find out about 70 to 80% of them. Young master, do you want to make a move now? Yi Li shook her head, saying, no, wait until Mo Jingli leaves before making a move. Wei Lin blinked, saying hesitantly, young master means that this time, Mo Jingli will personally head out. Yi Li sighed somewhat helplessly, saying, Xiaoyao is playing too big this time. I'm afraid that not only will Mo Jingli personally head out, even Enchanting will personally go as well. This Mo Jingli was indeed not a big deal. However, Enchanting was a little troublesome. Although he had clashed with the Prince Ding mansion several times, Enchanting didn't seem to have the upper hand. However, other than the time when he underestimated the enemy because of the princess, the remaining times could be said to be due to the circumstances. Enchanting's ability was far from what Mo Jingli and Yelu Yi could imagine. Yili smiled mildly, nodding her head, saying, "It's nothing. Since he chose this way, what I can do for him is to try my best to reduce the pressure on him." "Princess, if the prince really—" Wei Lin couldn't help but ask. Yili smiled mildly, saying, "Tie hair as a pillow, friends in the Yellow Springs." Wei Lin was silent. In the eyes of those who were close to the prince and the princess, they always saw the infatuation and longing for the prince towards the princess. However, the princess always seemed to be indifferent to it. Now Wei Lin finally understood that the princess's feelings towards the prince was not inferior to the prince's feelings towards the princess. However, compared to the princess didn't like to talk about these things even more. So the princess would put in so much effort. As long as it was something that the prince wanted to do, the princess would almost never oppose it. She would just calmly do what she could do or quietly accompany the prince by his side. As for the rest of the questions, Wei Lin felt that he really didn't need to ask anymore. He just looked at Yili respectfully, saying, "Please tell me, princess." Yili stood up and smiled mildly, saying, "Let's wait and see. When Mo Jingli leaves, the Chu capital should also change." Outside Nanjing, Dongfang Yu was walking slowly in an ordinary woman's cotton dress. Beside her were two young men who were also wearing the same clothes. The group looked like three ordinary siblings who had just returned from the capital. When they reached an intersection, Dongfang Yu stopped. A trace of murderous intent flashed across her beautiful face. She said mildly, "Get rid of those annoying flies behind." "Yes, young master." The two men replied respectfully. They turned around and disappeared by the side of the road. Dongfang Yu stood by the side of the road for a long while before she smiled mildly. She turned around and walked towards another path that was completely opposite. On the quiet path, the man in the cotton dress neatly took back the blood-stained software. He returned to his original simple and honest appearance of an ordinary person. He looked mildly at the corpses on the ground. He shook his head and turned around to leave. After a while, two men in black appeared beside the corpses. They looked down at the corpses whose blood had not dried. They kicked them and said somewhat helplessly, "We lost them." The other man said, "We lost them, but that doesn't mean that others lost them. Since they couldn't be too close, there would naturally be more people following them." The man in black sighed, saying, "Let's go back and report to young master first. These people from the infinite boundless mountain are really something." "There's no need." A faint voice came from behind. A handsome young man in white walked over with two black-robed men. The two hurriedly went forward to pay their respects. "Young master." Yili smiled mildly, "You don't have to take it to heart. If the people of infinite boundless mountain don't even have this bit of ability, how would they have the ability to snatch someone from King Ding's estate without anyone noticing? Scope. Young master already knows the whereabouts of young master Qingshan? We'll know when we get there." Yili said mildly. The place where the eastern secluded mountain hid people was indeed not easy to find. Even though Yili seemed to know the route, they still had to take a long detour through the mountains near the capital. They only stopped when they reached an unremarkable hunter's hut in the mountains. Zhuojing frowned, saying, "This doesn't seem like a place where young master Qingshan could be locked up." Although there were few people in these mountains, there were still the occasional hunters and farmers going in and out. Young master Qingshan's appearance was really too easy to attract attention. For such a divine young master like young master Qingshan to reside in such a place, the news would have long since spread. The people of the infinite boundless mountain also couldn't possibly silence everyone who entered the mountains. That would only attract even more attention. Yili smiled and pointed at that hut, saying, "Look at that hut. Do you see anything wrong with it?" Zhuojing and Wei Lin both looked over, but couldn't see anything wrong with it even after looking for a while. Yili smiled mildly, saying, "Looking at the hut, I'm afraid that it's already been here for a few decades. But look at that chimney." The two looked over and then suddenly realized. Wei Lin said, "It seems that no one has ever used the chimney." Yili nodded and smiled, saying, "Even if this hut is only occasionally used by hunters, it's impossible for them to never use the kitchen stove, unless there's another world inside. But how are we going to investigate? There might be someone in this hut." Zhuojing said. Yili said in a low voice, "We haven't confirmed whether Big Brother is here. It's indeed not good to act rashly and alert the enemy. But if we don't want to alarm anyone, this hut was really too small. It was impossible to go in and investigate without alerting the people in the hut. After thinking about it, Yili decided to wait first. At the same time, she pondered in her heart what secret was hidden under the hut. Was it a secret passage or an underground palace? There had to be a suitable place to hide someone. Yili believed that with Dongfang Yu's feelings for Su Qingchen, he would definitely not casually hide her in a cave. After waiting for a long time, they finally saw the door of the hut open from the inside. After a while, Dongfang Yu walked out with a sullen face. Even though they were far away, the three of them could still feel that Dongfang Yu's expression was very ugly. The men and women behind her were even more silent. Yili's heart suddenly had a bad premonition. Dongfang Yu's palm landed on a middle-aged man who was speaking in a panic. Before the man could say anything, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground, dead. Clearly, something had happened that made her extremely angry. Dongfang Yu happened to be facing their direction. Yili could tell what she was saying from her slightly moving lips. A bunch of trash. You can't even watch someone who doesn't know martial arts. What do I need you for? Yili was shocked. Could it be that Big Brother had escaped? If so, why didn't Big Brother contact them? The subordinates were clearly trying hard to explain something. Other than the two men who came with Dongfang Yu, the others all knelt on the ground. But Dongfang Yu's anger had not subsided. She said coldly, "When did he disappear?" Yili naturally could not see the subordinates' answers. Yili lowered her eyes and thought for a moment. She asked, "Do you have any confidence in catching Dongfang Yu now?" Shuijing and Wei Lin looked at each other and said in a low voice, "Our people are already nearby. It shouldn't be a problem. It's just that Dongfang Yu's qinggong seems to be very good. I'm just afraid that she will know that she is no match for us and will try to escape. It will be difficult for her to escape unscathed." Yili smiled faintly. "She's not anyone to us. Who wants you to escape unscathed? It's fine as long as she's not dead." "As you command," the two men said in unison. Outside the hunter's hut in the forest, Dongfang Yu said angrily and hurriedly, "Why aren't you looking for him? If you can't find young Master Qingchen in 3 days, be careful of your lives. There's no need to trouble Miss Dongfang's people with young Master Qingchen's whereabouts. Why don't Princess Li have a chat with me first?" On a hill not far away, a man's voice with a faint smile suddenly sounded. Chapter 898. There is no need to trouble Miss Dongfang's men with the whereabouts of young Master Qingchen. Why don't Princess Li have a chat with me first? On a hill not far away, a man's voice suddenly sounded with a faint smile. Hearing this, the faces of the people in front of the hut changed. Although this hut looked inconspicuous, there were many traps set up on the way here. They might not be able to hurt people, but once they touched the people in the hut, they would know immediately. However, this person had already quietly arrived in front of them without alerting anyone. "Who is it?" Dongfang Yu suddenly turned around and saw a man in black leaning against a tree at the bottom of a hill not far away. His arms crossed as he looked in her direction. Dongfang Yu thought for a moment and remembered the identity of this person, someone from the Prince Ding mansion. Although she did not know the name and identity of the man in front of her, Dongfang Yu still remembered that she had seen this person by Princess Ding's side. He was obviously Princess Ding's confidant. But she did not expect that while she was carefully guarding the Prince Ding mansion, Yili's confidant had already silently followed behind her. The man in black smiled and saluted. "Shuijing of the Prince Ding mansion greets Miss Dongfang." Dongfang Yu looked at him calmly and said, "What are you doing here? You can't be the only one who came to the Prince Ding mansion, right?" Shuijing said, "Whatever Miss Dongfang is doing here, I am here to do. I invite Miss Dongfang to come over for a chat." Dongfang Yu's face changed slightly and asked, "Yili is also here?" Shuijing smiled but did not speak. Dongfang Yu's mind was racing. She knew that the situation was not good for her. Last time, in order to catch Su Qingchen, the people she sent and Mo Jingli sent had both lost 70 to 80% of their men. One could imagine how powerful the guards of the Prince Ding mansion were, not to mention that Yili was personally in charge of the Prince Ding mansion's most elite Qilin. "I'm afraid I don't have the time to catch up with Princess Ding. If Princess Ding has any business, why don't you come to the Li Palace for a visit?" Dongfang Yu said lightly. Shuijing did not want to waste time talking to her. He smiled silently and raised his hand. Countless black figures appeared silently on the hills around the house. They blocked all the exits in a well-trained manner. It was impossible to escape even if one had wings. Dongfang Yu also understood that if he didn't make a move, he wouldn't be able to get out of the Prince Ding mansion. Without hesitation he flew forward and pounced in Zhuo Jing's direction. The people who followed Dongfang Yu naturally did not hold back when they attacked her. A scuffle in the forest began. Zhuo Jing smiled as he looked at the woman who was charging towards him. He did not care and drew his sword. Although Dongfang Yu's martial arts might be higher than his, he was not afraid of her. The two of them were soon entangled in a fight. On a hill not far away, Yili and Wei Lin looked down at the chaotic battle below. Although Dongfang Yu and the people around him were good at martial arts, there were not many of them. This place was very secluded. It was only a place that Dongfang Yu used to hide people. Naturally, there would not be too many people guarding it. In just a moment, Dongfang Yu's people were at the bottom. Princess, this Dongfang Yu's martial arts are really good. If not for the fact that there is something wrong with her head, Dongfang Yu can really be called a genius. Wei Lin could not help but praise. It was originally more difficult for women to practice martial arts than men. Dongfang Yu was only 16 or 17 years old and already had such profound martial arts. In terms of talent, she was not much worse than Mo Xiuyao when he was young. If all went well, she might become another martial arts genius after Mo Xiuyao. She might also become the first woman to obtain the title of the #1 expert in the world. Looking at the woman who was exchanging blows with Zhuo Jing, and even suppressing him, Yili could not help but nod and praise. The successor of the infinite boundless mountain is indeed a rare genius. Dongfang Yu was not only good at martial arts. She was also good at music, chess, calligraphy, painting, poetry, singing, dancing, astrology and medicine. Yili knew that she could not be such a genius. But at the same time, the thinking of a genius was different from that of an ordinary person. Her thinking was obviously not something that an ordinary person could accept. Should I go and help? Wei Lin asked. It was not that Zhuo Jing could not deal with Dongfang Yu. Even if Dongfang Yu was a genius, she still lacked experience. There was a difference between her and someone like Ren Qining who had been honed for a long time. If Zhuo Jing wanted to kill Dongfang Yu, he would have at least 3 to 5 chances to do so. But it would be difficult to catch her. No need, Yili shook her head and said with a smile, she can't run. Let's go down too. Dongfang Yu had no way to escape. But the one who gave her the fatal blow was not Zhuo Jing or the people of the Prince Ding mansion, but one of the guards who had always been by Dongfang Yu's side. When all of Dongfang Yu's subordinates had been taken down and only that guard was left, when that person rushed over to block Zhuo Jing's sword for her, Dongfang Yu thought that she had found a chance to escape. But she did not expect to be greeted by 2 swords. She dodged Zhuo Jing's sword and it only scratched her clothes a little. But the sudden attack from the young man whom she had never been on guard against seriously injured her. Clutching her chest, Dongfang Yu glared hatefully at the young man standing beside Zhuo Jing. What else did she not understand? You are from the Prince Ding mansion? Zhuo Jing said with a smile. If the infinite boundless mountain can plant people in the Prince Ding mansion, how can the Prince Ding mansion not plant people in the infinite boundless mountain? In the end, she was still too inexperienced. Even though Dongfang Yu had the highest level of martial arts in the world, she had no choice but to be controlled by others. Seeing Yili strolling over with Wei Lin, the anger in Dongfang Yu's eyes grew. Yili, it really is you. Yili said with a smile, I didn't want to appear here at first, but Miss Dongfang forced me to come. Since we are already here, why don't we go inside and have a seat? At this time there was no room for Dongfang Yu to speak. Her martial arts were controlled and she was forced to follow Yili into the small wooden hut beside. The small wooden hut was indeed a different world. The Prince Ding mansion's methods were naturally able to pry open these people's mouths. Especially after seeing with their own eyes how Dongfang Yu had casually killed their comrade, these people could not help but feel a sense of sympathy. Compared to the unpredictable, temperamental and ruthless Dongfang Yu, Ding Wangfei, who was dressed in white and had a gentle smile on her face, appeared especially amiable. Zhuo Jing and Wei Lin used less than 7 minutes to obtain the entrance to the secret passage from these people. Escorting Dongfang Yu in front, they walked for about an hour before they finally saw the light of day again. This place was actually a deep valley surrounded by cliffs and precipitous cliffs. Although Yili had a rough idea of this place based on the terrain and route in the secret passage before. But when she really saw such a place, she could not help but frown. In such a place, not to mention Su Qingchen, who did not know any martial arts, Even Yili herself would not be able to leave this place without alerting anyone. Moreover, Su Qingchen did not know any Qinggong, and with his physical strength, it would be very difficult for him to climb up the cliff that was close to 1,000 feet high. How did Big Brother disappear from here? Chapter 899. When did young Master Qingchen go missing? Yili asked indifferently as they sat in a simple building in the valley. Looking at the furnishings in the building, although it was simple, there was not a single thing missing. There was a half-read ancient book on the table, and Su Qingchen's room was also neat and tidy. It did not look like someone had broken in and kidnapped Su Qingchen. The men and women looked at each other, and one of them came forward and said, reporting to Princess, young Master Qingchen went missing 2 days ago. 2 days ago? Yili raised her eyebrows. Since young Master Qingchen went missing 2 days ago, why didn't you report it to Miss Dongfang? Did you send people to look for him? The man smiled bitterly. We sent people to look for him at that time, but they did not find him in the valley, outside the valley, on the mountain, and at the foot of the mountain. Young Master ordered us to look after young Master Qingchen. Now that young Master Qingchen has gone missing, we are really... Yili understood their thoughts. These people had followed Dongfang Yu for some time and probably knew Dongfang Yu's methods. Princess Xixia had only ridiculed Dongfang Yu with a few words, and she was almost beaten to death by Dongfang Yu, not to mention that these people had lost Su Qingchen. They could only drag it out. Who knows, they might find him before Dongfang Yu came. Yili glanced at Dongfang Yu, who was sitting stiffly at the side. In such a short time, Dongfang Yu could grow into a master that made her subordinates tremble with fear. It was really unexpected. However, now that she had caught him, it was no big deal. The infinite boundless mountain was a nail that had been buried in the various countries for hundreds of years. Sooner or later it would be completely eradicated. In this valley, other than the secret passage, is there any other way out? Yili asked. Everyone shook their heads, and the leader smiled bitterly. Princess, even if there is a way out, it is not something young Master Qingchen can get out of. You have to climb out of this cliff. But look at the cliff on all sides. It's as if it was carved by a knife. Not to mention young Master Qingchen, who doesn't know martial arts, even people like us. Yili nodded. If she didn't use any tools, even Yili wouldn't be able to climb up such a cliff. What was young Master Qingchen doing before he went missing? Because young Master ordered us not to neglect young Master Qingchen, so as long as young Master Qingchen doesn't run away, he can do whatever he wants. Young Master Qingchen has been very well behaved. Every day he just reads books and plays the zither. So we didn't pay much attention to it. Every day at that time, young Master Qingchen would sit on the hillside outside the house and read a book. Yili stood up and said, "Take me there." Now that these people's lives were in Yili's hands, they naturally wouldn't go against Yili. What's more, if Yili hadn't suddenly appeared with people with Dongfang Yu's anger at that time, they might have died like the unlucky ones who died first. So in a way, Princess Ding could be said to have saved their lives. What's more, no matter from which point of view, pledging loyalty to the Prince Ding mansion was much better than continuing to follow this already ruined boundless mountain. Yili smiled and looked at Dongfang Yu. Dongfang Yu stared back at Yili without showing any weakness. That gaze seemed to be dipped in poison. Yili frowned and said indifferently, "Miss Dongfang, I'll have to trouble you to stay here for a while." Dongfang Yu stared at her and said, "I want to go with you to find young Master Qingchen." Yili frowned. "Big Brother won't want to see you. Haven't you harmed him enough?" Dongfang Yu said angrily, "I didn't harm young Master Qingchen. I just... Yili waved her hand and said, "I don't want to hear what you just said. Just tell me if you want to stay here obediently." Dongfang Yu stared at her provocatively and said, "So what if I don't want to? If you have the ability, tie me up." Yili's lips curled up in a smile. "If that's the case." She raised her hand and a hand knife cleanly cut Dongfang Yu's neck. Dongfang Yu closed her eyes and fell to the ground. Wei Lin. Wei Lin looked at Yili with admiration and nodded with a smile. "Princess, don't worry. I guarantee that she won't cause any trouble." The Prince Ding mansion had many methods and drugs to block internal energy, ensuring that even if Dongfang Yu woke up, she would be limp and unable to move at all. After leaving Dongfang Yu, the group was led by those people to the place where Su Qingchen disappeared. It was indeed the place with the best scenery in the entire valley. There was a smooth stone on the ground. Compared to the stones in other places, this stone was exceptionally clean. It was obvious that someone often wiped it or sat on it. Yili sat down on the stone and looked around. She asked, "Where is the book that Big Brother was reading that day?" Everyone looked at each other. After a while they said, "It seems that it disappeared with young Master Qing Chen." Young Master Qing Chen had already caused a ruckus. How could he have the time to care about an unremarkable book? Now that they thought about it, young Master Qing Chen came out with a book. But after that they did not see the book nearby. This meant that when young Master Qing Chen left, he took the book with him. Shuijing whispered to Yili, "It seems like Master Qing Chen wasn't forced by anyone. Instead he left on his own accord. If he was forced by someone, he wouldn't have been so meticulous as to not forget to take a book with him. If young Master Qing Chen was taken away unconsciously, it was even more impossible. It could not be that the person who took young Master Qing Chen suddenly saw the ancient book and liked it so much that he took it with him." Yili pondered for a long time. Finally she pointed to the cliff in front of her and said, "Go up and take a look." Then she pointed to the lake not far away and said, "Go down and take a look." Immediately, a few guards in black walked to the cliff and began to climb up the cliff. Another 2 guards who were good at swimming slid into the water and sank silently. "Princess, young Master Qing Chen should not." A few guards who were originally guarding Su Qingchen thought that Yili thought that Su Qingchen had fallen into the lake. They hurriedly tried to persuade her. If young Master Qing Chen really fell into the lake, his body should have floated to the surface in these 2 days. Yili waved her hand to indicate that they did not need to say more. After a while, the guards who had climbed up the cliff came down. "Princess, there are footprints on the mountain." But young Master Qing Chen did not go up the cliff. It would take a lot of time and effort to bring someone who did not know martial arts up such a high cliff. Moreover, the chances of being discovered by the people below were too high. Moreover, there were no traces left on the stone wall or the cliff. Unless the other party was good enough to bring young Master Qing Chen up the cliff in one breath and fly further without using any force. However, even a prince would not be able to achieve such a level of skill. Yili sighed slightly. She did not have much hope at first. After waving the guards away, Yili silently stared at the rippling lake. Chapter 900. After a long time, the guard who had gone down before finally poked his head out from the bottom of the lake. He said with surprise, "Your Highness, there is a very deep karst cave at the bottom of the lake. I suspect that it can lead to the outside." Wei Lin frowned and said, "But even so, Master Qing Chen can't go out." Looking at the 2 guards, he knew that they were almost out of breath. Master Qing Chen's body couldn't be more suffocating than the guards of the Prince Ding mansion. What's more, did Master Qing Chen know how to swim? Yili's eyebrows relaxed slightly and said, "My eldest brother naturally didn't leave by himself." "Your Highness, do you mean that someone took Master Qing Chen away?" Shuijing asked. One of the guards who was still soaking in the lake raised a jade pendant and said, "Your Highness, I found this at the bottom of the lake." Wei Lin stepped forward and took it. It was indeed the jade pendant that Su Qingchen usually wore. The silk ribbon that tied the jade pendant was not broken, but the jade pendant was found in the lake. Obviously someone deliberately threw it there. Holding the jade pendant, Yili thought for a while and asked, "Can you go through?" "I'm incompetent. I'm afraid. I've swam very far, but I still can't feel the location of the exit. And this is the mountain. Even if there is an exit, I'm afraid it's not enough." The guard apologized. Yili waved her hand and said, "How can I blame you? You can get up first." Wei Lin, send people to secretly investigate all the places within a radius of 5 li, record down all the places with ponds and rivers. Shuijing, see if there are any people who live by the sea who can dive for a long time. Let them try from here. "Yes, Your Highness," the 2 men said in unison. Originally they thought that they had news of Su Qingchen, but they didn't expect to be happy for nothing. But at least they had news of Su Qingchen. Although Yili was worried about Su Qingchen's safety, she could only return to the city first. But at this time, because of Dongfang Yu's sudden disappearance, Nanjing City was turbulent. The Prince Li's mansion sent people to search everywhere. Yili was still walking on the street with Shuijing and Wei Lin, who had disguised themselves. On the other hand, Dongfang Yu had been sent back to the Chu mansion in the city. Yili did not intend to use Dongfang Yu as a chess piece now. It was not a good thing to alert the enemy. When Mo Jingli left Nanjing, Dongfang Yu and Mountain would be much more useful. Dongfang Yu was brought back to the Chu mansion in a box. Mo Jingli, who was frantically looking for Dongfang Yu, naturally did not expect that Dongfang Yu would be unconsciously put in a box and brought back to Nanjing like goods. When Dongfang opening the box, Dongfang Yu had already woken up of Yi, so even if she woke up she could only curl up in the box and wait helplessly for someone to let her out. Dongfang Yu's life was smooth. Except for the time when Su Qingchen couldn't get what she wanted and when she was forced to marry Mo Jingli, Dongfang Yu had never been wronged, let alone treated like this. So as soon as the box was opened, Wei Lin felt Dongfang Yu's sharp gaze. Wei Lin shrugged. He picked Dongfang Yu up and threw her into the chair next to him. Dongfang Yu glared at the person on the main seat angrily. But when she saw the handsome man sitting on the main seat, she was stunned. "It's you." Yili smiled faintly and nodded. "Miss Dongfang, you've been wronged." It was Chu Junwei, but it was Yi Li's voice. Dongfang Yu's face suddenly became very ugly. She gritted her teeth and said, "Yi Li, it's you. How dare you?" Master Chu, whom she liked at the chrysanthemum appreciation party, was actually Yi Li in disguise. This was absolutely more embarrassing for Dongfang Yu than anything else. But at this time she didn't have the time to care about Yi Li's trick. She asked hurriedly, "Where is Master Qingchen?" Yi Li shook her head helplessly. Dongfang Yu's feelings for Su Qingchen were definitely deep. Unfortunately she used the wrong method. And Su Qingchen really didn't have any thoughts about her. It was never a matter of one person to want two people to love each other. If Dongfang Yu only wanted to silently hinder Su Qingchen and not interfere with anyone else, Yi Li naturally wouldn't mock her feelings. However, if the other party had already rejected him in a righteous manner, it would be too much to force him to do anything if he continued to pester him or even use all sorts of methods. The Prince Ding mansion will take care of Big Brother's matter. If Miss Dongfang has time, you should think about yourself. Yi Li said calmly. "I want to see Master Qingchen." Dongfang Yu screamed. Yi Li frowned and said, "We haven't found Big Brother yet. I want to see Master Qingchen." Dongfang Yu continued to scream as if she didn't hear Yi Li's words. Yi Li sighed helplessly. "There's nothing to talk about. Miss Dongfang, please go and rest." "Yi Li, I want to see Master Qingchen." Dongfang Yu glared at Yi Li as if she was an evil mother-in-law who broke up an affectionate couple. Yi Li looked at her with a frown and asked faintly, "Miss Dongfang, these days have you thought of Madame Dongfang?" Dongfang Yu was slightly shocked and her face suddenly turned pale. Yi Li waved her hand and asked someone to take her away. Perhaps because Yi Li suddenly mentioned Dongfang Hui, Dongfang Yu was taken away in a daze. "Princess, I didn't expect that you would bring back such an amazing person." At the door, Yaoji stood at the door and looked at Yi Li with a smile. Yi Li raised her eyebrows slightly and looked at Yaoji, who came in person. She said, "Why are you here?" Yaoji smiled and said, "Prince Li is looking for someone all over the city. I know something big must have happened. But I didn't expect that Princess Li was missing." Yi Li was a little curious. Didn't Mo Jingli announce this? Yaoji covered her mouth and smiled. "I'm afraid that Mo Jingli has already determined that Dongfang Yu escaped with Master Qingchen. Why would he announce it and embarrass himself? I'm afraid that he would never expect that the Princess Regent he is looking for is in the Chu mansion, which is not far from Prince Li's mansion. How is it? Is there any news of Master Qingchen?" Yi Li frowned slightly and shook her head. Yaoji sighed softly and said, "Princess, don't worry. Master Qingchen is a good person. Nothing will happen to him. By the way, I came here in person for a proper business." Yi Li looked at her with a smile. Yaoji waved the invitation in her hand and said with a smile, "Prince Li is going to go to war, but he is a little short of military funds. So he wants to invite the rich and powerful people in the city to a banquet and borrow money from everyone?" Yi Li was stunned and said after a while, "So, Mo Jingli wants to borrow money from me to attack the Mahist army?" Yaoji smiled and said, "Who asked the Chu family to be a famous family in Dechu State?" Chapter 901. The Chu family was indeed a famous family in Dechu State. Unfortunately, Yi Li was not a member of the Chu family. What's more, the Chu family's headquarters in Yunzhou was still under the control of Lei Xinting. Why would the Chu family give money to Mo Jingli to attack the Prince Ding mansion? With the relationship between the Chu family and the Su family, it might be more reliable for the Prince Ding mansion to raise money to attack Mo Jingli. Yaoji helplessly stuffed the invitation into Yi Li's hands, saying, I didn't want to come to you with such a funny thing. But the regent handed this matter over to the Marquis Muyang's mansion. The Marquise in our mansion has been throwing a tantrum recently, so I had to come here personally. I also came to ask about young Master Qingshan. It's not easy for me to walk into your mansion openly. Yili looked at the invitation in her hands with a smile, saying calmly, it seems that Mo Jingli really trusts the Marquis Muyang's mansion. Yaoji pursed her lips, saying, Old Marquis Muyang is a man who swings with the wind. He naturally knows what to do and what not to do. After Mo Jingli passed away, the Marquis Muyang's mansion immediately leaned towards Mo Jingli. Although the Marquis Muyang's mansion had some conflicts with Princely in the past, Marquis Muyang has helped Princely a lot in the past 2 years. What's more, he has taken the initiative to withdraw and pass the title to Mo Jingli. Mo Jingli has to do something. Otherwise, how can he appease the old officials of Mo Jingqi? Yili thought it made sense. She gently patted the invitation in her hands, saying, I know. Go back and tell Marquis Muyang that Chu Junwei will definitely be on time for the banquet. Yaoji looked at her curiously. You're not really planning to help Mo Jingli raise money for the army, are you? Yili smiled but did not say anything. Instead she asked, I'm a little curious. Why is Mo Jingli short of money? In the past few years the Dechu state had not suffered from any disasters, nor had it sent troops abroad. A few years ago when Mo Jingli moved south he emptied the Dechu state's treasury. Of course most of that money went into Mo Jingli's private vault. Yili once thought that Mo Jingli might be one of the richest people in the world. Yaoji shrugged, I don't know about that. However, I'm afraid the Dechu state's treasury didn't have much money. Didn't the Dechu state go to war several times in a row? The most tragic thing was that they were defeated in every battle. In the end they even lost Chujing. Furthermore, even if Mo Jingli has the money, he may not be willing to use it to pay the soldiers. Hearing this, Yili could not help but smile. I didn't expect Mo Jingli to have the habit of being a miser. Speaking of which, among the nobles the Prince Ding mansion was the most powerful. However, Prince Ding and Princess Ding themselves were not very rich. The wealth under the Prince Ding mansion's name was naturally incalculable. However, Yili and Mo Shuyao did not have the temperament to accumulate wealth. Therefore their private vaults added up to no more than 400,000 to 500,000 taels of silver. It seemed a lot, but compared to the other nobles it was not enough. Yaoji did not stay any longer. She stood up and smiled. Since the invitation has been delivered, Yaoji will take her leave. Yili also knew that many things in the Marquis Muyang's mansion were handled by Yaoji. Yili stayed a little longer and smiled faintly. Be careful. Outside Nanjing City, in a deep mountain dozens of miles away, a few simple thatched cottages were located between the mountains and rivers. They were almost integrated with the trees and flowers in the mountains. If one did not walk close, one would not be able to see that there were people living in this deserted place. In front of the thatched cottages, there were a few small herbal fields. There were many commonly used herbs in the fields. Although it was the beginning of winter, many of the herbs had dried up and looked a little sparse. However, those that were still alive were well taken care of. The entire herbal field was clean and orderly. In the cottage, a handsome young man leaned against the window and sat on the bed. He was casually flipping through an ancient book in his hand. With a faint smile on his lips, he looked like an immortal. Who else could it be but Master Qingshan, who was almost searched inside and outside Nanjing City by the Mahist army but could not find. After reading for a while, Master Qingshan raised his head and glanced outside. The smile on his lips was a little more helpless. There was a dull pain in his chest, so he could only suppress the idea of getting out of bed and walking for a while. Who would have thought that the handsome and talented young Master Qingshan would have such bad luck? There was a light sound of footsteps outside the door. A girl in cotton clothes came in from outside, holding a bamboo basket full of various herbs. Seeing the person leaning against the bed, she quickly put down the bamboo basket and came forward to inquire, Su Qingshan, why are you sitting up? Are you better? The girl was only 15 or 16 years old. Her beautiful hair was just casually tied with a thin string similar to the cloth on her clothes. She was wearing a light green coarse dress. Her dress was even worse than that of a typical village girl. However, such a coarse dress could not hide the girl's beauty. Her light pink lips were red without any makeup, her exquisite nose, and her clear eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. Although she was still young, it was difficult to hide the girl's peerless beauty. However, at this moment, This lovable girl was frowning and looking apologetically at Master Qingchen on the bed. Su Qingchen, are you better? It's all my fault. Su Qingchen looked helplessly at the girl who was about to cry. He softly comforted her. How can I blame you? Speaking of which, you saved me. But if I didn't insist on taking you away, you wouldn't have been injured. The girl said guiltily. When she went up the mountain to pick herbs, she heard the pleasant sound of a zither and followed it. Seeing a godlike person playing the zither in the valley, she remembered that her father had left her a zither when he was alive. She didn't know how to play it, so she quietly went down the valley to ask for advice. When she heard that the godlike master was actually imprisoned there, she wanted to save him. However, she didn't expect that she would accidentally cause him to be seriously injured underwater. If she had known, she wouldn't have brought him out. Anyway, those people seem to be very good to him. That won't do. I'd rather be injured than leave that place. So I still want to thank you. What's more, aren't you already treating my injuries? Su Qingchen smiled faintly. Although he was sure that the people from the Prince Ding mansion would come to save him, he didn't know when exactly. Sometimes, even if one was a little bit late, they would still be in big trouble. Master Qingchen had been away from home for decades and had been safe. In addition to having a wide circle of friends, he was the best at judging the situation. Instead of meeting with that crazy woman Dongfang Yu, he would rather be injured and come out first. It had to be said that this was the first time in his life that Master Qingchen secretly regretted that he didn't know martial arts. The girl nodded repeatedly, and her bright and beautiful face suddenly burst into a smile. Yes, I'll be able to cure you soon. My medical skills are very good. The doctors in the city all say that the medicine I make is very effective. Su Qingchen, I bought some good medicine from the city and just made it. You can eat it. The girl took out a small wooden bottle and presented it to him as if it was a treasure. She blinked her big eyes and looked at him eagerly. Su Qingchen smiled helplessly, reached out to take the medicine bottle and opened it. A refreshing fragrance immediately wafted out of the small bottle. A milky white pill was poured out of the bottle. Su Qingchen put it in his mouth and it melted immediately. In a moment he only felt that the discomfort all over his body reduced a lot. There were only 5 pills in the small bottle. Although Su Qingchen was not proficient in medical skills, he was quite knowledgeable. Naturally, he could find that these small pills must cost a lot of medicinal materials. Chapter 902. The girl always thought that she had caused Su Qingchen's injury and felt guilty. In fact, Su Qingchen was much more important than her. Originally, the girl only wanted to ask for guidance on the zither. Perhaps she was lonely living alone in the mountains and wanted to talk to someone. The girl always thought that she wanted to meddle in other people's business to save Su Qingchen. In fact, if not for Su Qingchen's deliberate words, this child who had not yet grown up would not have thought of this. However, the injury was indeed out of Su Qingchen's expectations. The girl in front of him took care of him carefully, wanting to heal Su Qingchen as soon as possible. After spending time together, Su Qingchen already knew that the girl had lived in the mountains with her father since she was young. After her father passed away 3 years ago, she lived alone. Occasionally, she would take some herbs and simple pills that she grew and sell in the city to exchange for daily necessities. This time, in order to treat Su Qingchen's injuries, the young girl had used up all the silver that her father had saved for many years when he was still alive. She had also gone deep into the mountains to find some precious medicinal herbs that ordinary people would not be able to guess in exchange for the medicinal herbs needed for the treatment. Therefore, every time he met the girl's guilty eyes, Su Qingchen felt that he was really a bastard for the first time in his life. Yungu, come and sit down. Su Qingchen waved at the girl. The girl named Yungu blinked and walked to a stool not far from Su Qingchen's bed and sat down obediently. Su Qingchen asked softly, Yungu, did anything happen in the city today? Yungu blinked and said, I heard from the people in the city that there's going to be a war. A war? Su Qingchen frowned slightly. The Dechu state's only opponent south of the Yunlong River was Lei Jinting, Genom of Gojoseon of Xiling. But logically, Lei Jinting would not use force against the Dechu state now. With whom? Yungu pouted and said, with the Mahist army. My father said that the Mahist army are good people and Princely wants to fight with them. Princely is a bad person. Su Qingchen raised her eyebrows and asked, why did your father say that Prince Ding is a good person? Yungu thought for a while and said, My father said that the Prince Ding mansion was devoted to the country and was loyal and courageous. Unfortunately, his achievements were too high to be tolerated by his superiors, so Prince Ding died young. My father said that the people in the Prince Ding mansion are all good people. As he spoke, he nodded heavily to show his agreement. Su Qingchen then understood that Yunji's father should be the former Prince Ding, Mo Lufeng or Mo Xuan. He just didn't know who the hermit who had passed away early was. Since he could teach Yunj such profound medical skills and martial arts, he should not be an ordinary person. Alright, Prince Ding is a good person. Is there any more news? I asked you to check on the Chu estate in the city. Is there any movement? Yungu nodded and said, I've been watching for a long time. There are always people going in and out. But there are many experts in the estate, so I don't dare to go near. But I saw a very good-looking white-clothed young master. There was also a very beautiful elder sister who went in. White-clothed young master. Su Qingchen was deep in thought. Li Er actually came personally? Yungu looked at him doubtfully and said, You want to find that white-clothed young master? I'll help you find him tomorrow. Also, there are many people looking for something in the nearby mountains. When I came back, I was almost discovered by them. I went to that valley today and there was no one there. But don't worry, no one can find us here. Don't be afraid. Su Qingchen was a little helpless. He was afraid that this place was too secretive. Not only could no one find him, even the people sent by Li Er to find him could not find him. But this was also good. He could not move for a while. It was better for everyone not to find him than to be found by the enemy. Su Qingchen, can you teach me how to play the zither? Yungu looked at Su Qingchen and said softly. Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows and smiled. Okay, didn't I promise you before? When I've recovered, I'll teach you how to play the zither. Yungu looked at him. Shouldn't you leave when you've recovered? I'm playing now. Can you help me take a look? Actually, I've learned a little. It's all my fault. When father taught me in the past, I refused to learn properly. In the end, father, no one taught me. Looking at the anticipation and sadness in the girl's eyes, Su Qingchen's heart paused slightly. He smiled faintly and said, Why does Yungu want to learn how to play the zither? The sound of the zither is very nice. I can play it for myself. Yungu said with a smile. Su Qingchen sighed slightly. This Yunji's father was a little too relaxed. When he passed away, Yungu was only a 12 or 13-year-old girl. Even if she had martial arts, it was too lonely to live alone in this deep mountain. However, with this little girl's appearance and temperament, if there were no close relatives to look after her, it would be safer for her to live in this uninhabited place. However, this little girl had lived here for a few years and had never thought of leaving. Usually, she would only go into the city once a month to exchange for some daily necessities. For the past few years, she had followed her father's instructions before he passed away and only brought some common herbs and medicine to repay the debt. Otherwise, with her medical skills, she would have become famous long ago. Su Qingchen lowered his eyes and thought for a moment before asking, Yungu, don't you plan to leave this place? Yungu looked at him blankly. Why should I leave this place? Father said that there are a lot of bad people out there. Even a good-looking person like Su Qingchen had been captured. If she were to leave this place, she would definitely be captured by bad people. Back then, not long after her father passed away, Yungu had encountered several robbers when she first entered the city alone. Fortunately, Yunji's martial arts were not bad and it was easy for her to get rid of these people. After that, Yungu knew to cover up her appearance every time she entered the city. However, if she were to leave this place, she could not possibly cover her face with dust every day, right? Although she was born in the countryside, it was a girl's nature to love beauty. Yungu did not want to be dirty every day. Su Qingchen was helpless. He could not help but raise his hand to knock her on the head. However, he accidentally pulled on his own injury and frowned in pain. Yungu quickly jumped up and pressed him back. Don't move around. Your injury hasn't healed yet. Su Qingchen looked at her and said, It's not a long-term plan for a girl like you to stay in the mountains. Why don't you come with me to Glass City? Yungu was stunned for a moment before she finally shook her head. She said, No, father said that he wants me to stay here. Someone will come and pick me up in the future. Pick you up? Who? Did your father say when he would come and pick you up? Su Qingchen suddenly realized. It was impossible for Yunji's father to not consider his daughter's future. However, it had been 3 years and there was still no news. Would the other party really keep his promise and come? Yoongu thought for a moment and said with some confusion, "Father wrote a letter and asked me to send it out. Someone will come and pick me up. However, no one has come." What a silly girl. The letter had been sent out for 3 years and no one came. It was either that the other party did not receive the letter or they did not intend to come at all. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and said, "How about this? You come back with me and we will leave a letter here. If someone comes to pick you up, they can go to Glass City to find you. When I return, I will also send someone to see if anyone comes here. Moreover, didn't you say that my internal injury will take a long time to heal? You can go and help me treat my injury, right?" Chapter 903. Yoongu looked at him awkwardly. She really wanted to leave this place with Su Qingchen. Although she was not particularly fond of crowds, after having Su Qingchen accompany her to talk these days, she felt a little sad when she thought of being alone again. However, her father had instructed her to wait here for someone. She could not disobey. Seeing her hesitate, Su Qingchen's eyes flashed and he smiled. "Do you still remember the address to send the letter? I'll get someone to help you find them. Perhaps they really did not receive the letter. Then wouldn't you have to wait here for the rest of your life?" Yoongu thought for a long time before finally nodding and telling him an address. Hearing this, Su Qingchen could not help but frown. Yoongu saw that his complexion was not good and could not help but worry. "Su Qingchen, what's wrong?" Su Qingchen asked, "Is your surname Mu?" "Oh, my surname is not Mu. My father's surname is Shen," Yoongu said in confusion. Did she not tell Su Qingchen her surname? Tilting her head, she thought for a moment. It seemed that she had indeed forgotten to tell him that her surname was Shen. If a person had lived alone for too long, their surname was probably not that important anymore. "Then what is your mother's surname?" Su Qingchen asked. Yoongu said, "My father said that my mother's surname was Li." Su Qingchen nodded. "I know who your father is looking for. I can bring you there. When I've recovered, you can come with me." Yoonji's eyes brightened. "Really?" Su Qingchen smiled and nodded. Looking at the happy girl in front of him, he sighed softly in his heart. This was just a lonely child. The Chu estate reporting to the princess. A servant has come to report that a girl was peeping outside just now. Wei Lin came in to report. Yili raised her eyebrows slightly. "A girl?" Wei Lin nodded. "That girl's martial arts are not bad, but she does not have much experience. She only left after looking outside for most of the day." Yili smiled with interest. Whether it was Infinite Boundless Mountain or Mo Jingli, they would definitely not send an inexperienced girl to spy on the Chu estate. "Did you see clearly what she looked like?" "She seemed to be 15 or 16 years old. However, I did not see her face clearly. Also, the person who followed her out of the city has already returned." Yili smiled and said, "You lost him?" Wei Lin nodded in shame. He felt that the Shadow Guard was becoming more and more out of hand recently. First, he lost young Master Qingchen. Now he even lost a 15-year-old girl. It was a complete disgrace to Qilin. Yili smiled and said, "That's enough. You don't have to scold them. Logically speaking, they would never lose sight of an inexperienced little girl." He ordered his men to search the area where the girl went missing. In addition, send people to keep an eye on that place. That little girl definitely won't point it out this time. Wei Lin nodded and said, "Yes, many thanks to Princess Consort's kindness." Yili shook her head and said, "Even so, I think Qilin still needs to learn something else. Yes, I will follow your orders." Yili smiled and said, "We'll talk about this later. Do you think this little girl has something to do with Big Brother?" Wei Lin lowered his eyebrows and thought for a while. He said, "It is indeed very possible." Even Mo Jingli did not notice anything unusual about the Chu residence. Why would that little girl specially come to watch the Chu residence? Moreover, she appeared near where young Master Qingchen went missing. Perhaps this little girl is the one who saved young Master Qingchen. But, since young Master Qingchen was saved, why didn't he come back? Yili frowned and said, "Big Brother is very likely to be seriously injured. Don't worry. Since Big Brother knows that we are here, there should be news soon." "Yes. I will send people to keep an eye on that place. The Li Palace is very strict today. Soon we will have to attend Mo Jingli's banquet. Princess Consort, it is better not to go out of the city personally," Wei Lin said. Yili nodded and sighed. "That is the only way." Sure enough, Yili saw the little girl mentioned by Wei Lin at noon the next day. When she saw her, she could not help but feel happy. It was actually a little girl. She looked to be less than 16 years old. Most importantly, she had a pair of crystal clear eyes. Even someone like Yili could not help but feel ashamed when she saw them. Yungu was brought into the Chu residence by the people of the Prince Ding mansion. Originally, she was entrusted by Su Qingchen to meet Yili. However, Su Qingchen told her that she could not enter through the front door and be seen by others. Therefore, Yungu could only go to the backyard of the Chu residence and plan to climb over the wall. However, she did not know that there were many more guards in the backyard of the Chu residence than the front door. Naturally, she was caught without any accident. Yungu looked at Yili curiously and asked, "Are you the Li that Su Qingchen mentioned?" Yili smiled and nodded, "That's right, I am Li. Little girl, who are you?" Yungu smiled, "I'm Shin Yungu. I'm Su Qingchen's friend. You're very pretty, but why are you wearing men's clothes?" Yili was a little surprised. "You can tell that I'm a girl? Or did Big Brother tell you?" Yili thought that she had dressed up very well. At least no one had been able to see through her yet. At least not this innocent little girl in front of her could. "I'm a doctor," Shin Yungu said proudly. "Of course I can see. There are many differences between men and women." Yili smiled. It seemed that there was still a big difference between those who knew medicine and those who knew medicine. At least the other person who claimed to be proficient in medicine did not see through her identity. Yili looked at the little girl in front of her and asked, "Is my big brother okay?" Hearing this, Shin Yunji's little face suddenly drooped. She said bitterly, "I'm sorry, it's all my fault. Su Qingchen was seriously injured." "Don't worry, I know you saved Big Brother. Tell me what happened slowly." Yili comforted her softly. Shin Yungu told the story of her encounter with Su Qingchen in detail. Yili understood. Maybe it was an accident that Shin Yungu heard the zither at first. But it was no longer an accident when Shin Yungu ran into the valley to ask Big Brother to hand over the zither without alerting anyone. It would be too much to blame this little girl for what happened to Big Brother. Even Zhuojing and Wei Lin, who were standing behind Yili, had a strange look on their faces. They silently criticized in their hearts. Is this the retribution of Mr. Qingchen for abducting an innocent girl? Yili patted Shin Yunji's little hand and smiled. "How can I blame you? I want to thank you for saving Big Brother." Shin Yungu was prepared to be scolded, but Yili's gentle behavior made Shin Yungu a little uncomfortable. She asked in a low voice, "Li, you don't blame me?" Yili smiled and said, "You don't have to be so polite. I'm a few years older than you. You can call me Sister Li. It's not your fault, so how can I blame you? What's more, you're a little girl and you brought Big Brother out from the bottom of the water. It's inevitable that you bumped into him." Yili was really a little surprised. How could Shin Yungu, who was so small, drag a big man out from the bottom of the water? Even if it was a big man, it would not be easy. Therefore, Mr. Qingchen's internal injuries were really light. It was good enough that he did not hit his head. Chapter 904. Yunji's eyes lit up. The only people she was familiar with since she was young were her father and mother. When she was at the foot of the mountain, she was very envious when she saw other people with older sisters. "Sister Li, good child." Yili lovingly patted her little head and smiled. "How is Big Brother's injury now?" Yungu said, "He will be able to move freely in a few days. But he can't move well for the next few days." I've said what Su Qingchen wanted me to say. I have to go back, otherwise he will be hungry." Yili smiled and nodded. "In that case, I will trouble you with Big Brother. I will send someone to treat him when he is better in a few days." Yungu shook her head and smiled. "It's no trouble. Su Qingchen will talk to me." "Very good." "Good. Wei Lin, send Miss Yungu out of the city. Also, if Big Brother needs any medicine, send it over as well." Yili turned her head and instructed. Wei Lin replied, "This subordinate obeys." Seeing Wei Lin take Yungu out, Yili couldn't help but laugh softly. "What an interesting little girl, isn't she?" Zhuojing nodded and said, "I really didn't expect that the one who took young Master Qingchen away was such a delicate little girl. Most importantly, this little girl's character is so clean and bright, which is rarely seen. Most importantly, there was actually such a beautiful little girl in the wilderness. Young Master Qingchen was really lucky. Why didn't Princess send someone to take care of young Master Qingchen?" Zhuojing smiled. Yili said lightly, "Since Miss Yungu has taken good care of Big Brother for so many days, It's okay to trouble her for a few more days. What? Shuijing raised his eyebrows and smiled. What does princess mean? Yili waved her hand and stood up. I don't mean anything. Big brother has been tired these few years. It's rare for him to have this opportunity. He should recuperate well. That little girl's personality was pure and simple. She didn't seem to be as polite as the other girls. Big brother allowed her to come to the Chu mansion because he trusted her. Since that was the case, she should stay well. You are right, princess. Yungu took many bags of things with her and was sent to a place not far from her home by the guards of the Prince Ding mansion before she went back. As soon as they entered, Su Qingshan looked at the little lass who was almost drowned by all kinds of boxes. She couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and smile. Since when did you like to go shopping? Yungu touched the sweat on her face and said with a puffed-up face, I didn't buy it. It was a gift from big sister Liu. Su Qingshan looked at her with some amusement. They had only met once and she was already calling her sister Li. What an unguarded little girl. While Yungu was busy putting all kinds of things on the table, she muttered softly, Su Qingshan, you're really a young master. It's just a few days, but you actually have to prepare so many things. Fortunately, Big Brother Imperial Bodyguard helped me carry them up the mountain. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to bring them all back for you by myself. Opening it, there were indeed many things. Su Qingshan needed all kinds of medicinal herbs and tonics to recuperate, as well as all kinds of books to pass the time. She also needed 3 or 4 sets of clothes. Even the matching jade pendant and so on were all prepared. Su Qingshan glanced at it and pointed to a box next to her. Open that and take a look. Yungu glanced at it curiously. This. She opened it and took a look. Inside was a light yellow exquisite women's dress. Yungu didn't know, but Su Qingshan didn't know. Just by looking at the outer shell of the box, she knew that it was the most famous women's dress in Nanjing City. Su Qingshan smiled and said, That's a gift from Li. You can try it. For me. Yungu was a little puzzled. She looked at the beautifully embroidered light yellow dress in the box and blinked her eyes. She was used to wearing plain cotton clothes. Although she had seen many girls wearing beautiful clothes when she went to the city, she had never envied them. Clothes as long as they could be worn warm. But at this time, looking at the bright clothes and then looking at Su Qingshan in a white dress who was looking at her with a smile, Yungu suddenly felt a little ashamed of her slovenly appearance. She picked up the box and hurried out. Su Qingshan smiled and looked at the little girl's figure disappearing at the door. She couldn't help but shake her head and laugh. Teasing children was really a very interesting thing. At the same time, Su Qingshan couldn't help but look forward to Yunji's appearance after putting on new clothes and dressing up seriously. As for Li, obviously didn't want him to intervene in the affairs of Nanjing City. Let nature take its course. What's more, he was injured to the point where he couldn't even get up. If he went back, he would only drag her down. A mere Mo Jingli probably couldn't stop Li. Young Master Qingshan, who was in a happy mood, completely forgot that in a military camp in the north, there was a man who was anxiously looking forward to the return of his beloved wife. Su Qingshan, you'd better not come back, for you still need Li to go all the way to Jiangnan to find you. I must make you work like an ox for the Prince Ding mansion until the next life. Chapter 905. Su Qingshan. While Su Qingshan was deep in thought, Yunji's delicate figure was already standing outside the door. She looked at the handsome man inside hesitantly. Su Qingshan raised his head and looked at the girl in yellow at the door with a faint smile. Why don't you come in? The girl's delicate face was slightly red. She pulled her sleeves uncomfortably and looked at Su Qingshan eagerly. Su Qingshan smiled and praised, very pretty. But she was very pretty. The girl's delicate and small face did not have any makeup. Her slightly red face seemed to be dyed with light rouge and was as beautiful as a peach. There was a faint uneasiness in her bright eyes, which made her look even more lovable. Although Yili was not someone who liked to dress up, she had good taste. The light yellow robe was embroidered with light pink plum blossoms. A light-colored belt was tied around her willowy waist. Because it was already early winter, she even wore a light purple cloak with a white fox edge. The fluffy white fox fur around her neck made Yunji's petite face look even more exquisite and pretty, making it hard for people to take their eyes off her. Hearing Su Qingshan's praise, the girl's smile grew. Su Qingshan looked at the smiling girl not far away and could not help but be a little dazed. Nanjing City, Prince Regent's residence. The Prince Regent's residence was very lively today. As long as one had some reputation and ability, they would be invited to the Prince Regent's banquet. Although there were some people who did not look so happy. But now, the Prince Regent's residence held great power in Jiangnan and their words carried weight. Even if they did not like it, no one dared to go against the Prince Regent's wishes. Yili still brought Shuijing and Wei Lin over. Wei Lin went forward and handed an invitation to the housekeeper at the door. The housekeeper looked at the elegant and handsome young master in front of him and could not help but secretly admire him. Although this young Master Chu was from the north, he was handsome and elegant. Even in Jiangnan, the home of talents, there were few people who could compare to him. It was no wonder that Yunzhou was called the home of the wise. Stunned, the housekeeper quickly let people lead Yi Li and the others into the residence. This was Yi Li's first time coming to the Li Palace. Although she already knew the layout of the Li Palace like the back of her hand, it was different to actually enter it. The buildings in the northern lands were mostly about grandeur, while the buildings in Jiangnan were all about meticulous craftsmanship. Mo Jingli had always cared about his face, so the regent's residence was naturally the best residence in Nanjing. It was even comparable to the Prince Ding mansion in the Chu capital. From this, it could be seen just how strong Mo Jingli's desire to compete with Mo Xiuyao was. The banquet was held in a large hall in the center of the mansion. There were 9 rooms in this hall and 5 rooms deep. The floor was paved with golden bricks and the atmosphere was magnificent. The main entrance was inscribed with the name Tai Hua Hall. Yi Li, who was standing at the entrance of the main hall, raised her eyebrows and asked, "Why do I find this Tai Hua Palace hall somewhat familiar?" Shuijing laughed softly and said, "Young master, this is somewhat similar to the Qingjing Palace Hall in the Chu capital. No wonder young master finds it familiar." Yi Li suddenly understood. Actually, it was not that this Tai Hua Palace Hall was similar to the Qingjing Palace Hall. Qingjing Hall was a palace built by the founding emperor of the Chu capital. It was magnificent but did not lose the domineering aura of an emperor. On the other hand, this Tai Hua Palace was overly concerned with exquisite and luxurious decorations. The carvings and paintings on the walls were meticulously crafted. Instead, it fell behind and seemed somewhat petty. But the 9 doors and the mythological beast at the corner of the hall were no different from the Qingjing Palace Hall. 9 was the extreme number and only the emperor could use it. Even in the main hall of Prince Ding's residence, the number was only 7. Mo Jingli's desire for the throne was not concealed in the slightest. Stepping into the hall, there were already many dignitaries sitting there. As soon as Yi Li entered, she saw Marquis Mu Yang and his son sitting at the front, and Yaoji sitting next to Mu Yang. Yaoji smiled and nodded at Yi Li. Mu Yang, who was sitting next to her, naturally turned his gaze over. He looked at Yi Li and then looked at Yaoji. Yaoji smiled and whispered a few words in Mu Yang's ear. Only then did Mu Yang nod at Yi Li. Yi Li indifferently returned the greeting. The servant who led the way led her to a seat and sat down. Although the Chu family was a famous family in Dechu State, they did not have much power in Nanjing City. So Yi Li's actions were not very important, but also not very important. With Chu Junwei's status, this seat was very flattering. As soon as Yi Li entered the hall, she attracted the attention of many people. Many people who didn't know her couldn't help but ask each other which family's young master was so elegant. "Are you Chu Junwei, young Master Chu?" The middle-aged man sitting next to Yi Li asked with a smile. Yi Li nodded and said, "May I know who you are?" The middle-aged man smiled and said, "My surname is Lin. I'm just a businessman. I can't compare to young Master Chu's family." Yi Li smiled and said, "Mr. Lin is too polite. The Lin family is the leader of the silk business in Jiangnan. Their family property is huge. I'm afraid that they are not below the richest people in the world. How can Chu Junwei's family be compared to them?" Yi Li's words were obviously to the middle-aged man's liking. Businessmen were rich but not expensive. They were always a bit envious and jealous of these scholars. These people said a good word about him, it was worth 100 words from ordinary people. Young Master Chu is too polite. We are all stink of money. How can we compare to young Master Chu? Actually, this middle-aged man was not unfamiliar to Yi Li. Although they had never met before, Lin was one of the leading silk merchants in Jiangnan. Most of the silk that Li City transported to the western regions was traded with the Lin family. As the mistress of the Prince Ding mansion, Yi Li naturally would not be unaware of her business partners. Mr. Lin is too kind. It's just that this time I was learning from Jiangnan. I didn't expect to meet Prince Li at this time. I'm from a branch family. How can I make decisions for the Chu family? Yili sighed and frowned. When the middle-aged man heard this, he couldn't help but sigh and said, "Young master is right. It's a pity that Prince Li is in power. As the saying goes, the people do not fight with the officials. What can we, the common people, do?" He had a large business with the Prince Ding mansion. It could be said that it was because of the Prince Ding mansion's business that his Lin family was able to sit firmly in the top position in Jiangnan's silk business. Something happened to the Prince Ding mansion, what good would it do for the Lin family? Moreover, he didn't think highly of Prince Li at all. If it wasn't for the fact that the Lin family's silk business couldn't move in Jiangnan, he would have moved the Lin family to Li City a long time ago. Now it was great. Who didn't know that the Prince Ding mansion was well informed? If the Prince Ding mansion found out that he had donated money to Prince Li, the middle-aged man frowned and his expression became even more unsightly. Yili was sitting next to him. How could she not know what he was thinking? She then sighed helplessly and said, "Fortunately, my family is in Yunzhou. If I can immediately return to Yunzhou after today, there shouldn't be any problems. At most, I'll just give one of the side courtyards in Nanjing to the princely mansion. I'm sure that the Prince Ding mansion won't blame me for the Su family's sake." When he heard this, the middle-aged man was stunned for a moment. Then he suddenly became happy. He grabbed Yi Li and said with a smile, "Young master is going out. I'm sure you won't bring so many burdens. If there's anything you need, I'll do my best." Chapter 906. Yi Li calmly withdrew her hand and said with a faint smile, "How could I trouble Mr. Lin?" The middle-aged man smiled apologetically. "How could it be a trouble? As the saying goes, rely on your parents at home and rely on your friends when you're out. This one also wants to be friends with Mr. Chu, but I'm afraid that Mr. Chu will dislike us businessmen for being vulgar." Yi Li smiled and suddenly felt that the person in front of her was somewhat interesting. After thinking for a while, she nodded and said with a smile, "I don't know how this one can repay Mr. Lin." The middle-aged man looked around cautiously and said with a smile, "Why don't we discuss this in private?" Yi Li said, "This one is only from a side branch of the Chu family. If I disappoint Mr. Lin when the time comes, wouldn't it be beautiful?" The middle-aged man was helpless and could only laugh in a low voice. "Actually, it's nothing. Mr. Chu is such a talent. This one doesn't believe that he has no influence in the Chu family. This one just wants to ask Mr. Chu to recommend Mr. Qing Chen or Mr. Han." When Prince Ding and Princess Ding were not in Glass City, Mr. Qing Chen was in charge of the Prince Ding mansion and Han Mingxi was in charge of the Prince Ding mansion's external business. No matter which one he recommended, he would not lose out. Yi Li lowered her eyes and said with a faint smile, "So it's like this. It's just a small matter." Hearing this, the middle-aged man could not help but feel relieved. He could not help but think more highly of Yi Li. This was not a small matter. With his status, it was extremely difficult to meet Mr. Qing Chen. This Chu Junwei's relationship with Mr. Qing Chen must not be bad to have such confidence. Then many thanks to Mr. Chu. The middle-aged man cupped his hands and smiled. "The regent has arrived. The emperor has arrived." A sharp voice interrupted the middle-aged man's words. Yi Li smiled faintly and signaled him to talk later. The middle-aged man hurriedly put away his regretful expression and stood up to welcome the regent and the emperor. The little emperor wore a bright yellow dragon robe as he followed beside Mo Jingli. Speaking of which, Mo Xiyun was almost a year older than Mo Xiaobao, but right now Mo Xiyun was probably half a head younger than Mo Xiaobao when Yi Li left Glass City a few months ago. He followed beside Mo Jingli in fear and trepidation. No matter how one looked at him, he didn't look like the ruler of a country. Instead, he looked like a pitiful child who was being abused. Ying walked beside Mo Jingli. Seeing the pitiful child, she wanted to reach out and give him a hand, but she didn't dare to because of Mo Jingli's expression. "Greetings to the regent." "Greetings, your majesty." According to the original rules, even if the regent was in power now, the emperor should be placed first. However, when the announcement was made previously, the regent was placed first. Among the people who attended the banquet, the court officials were already used to it. As for the wealthy merchants who were invited, a large portion of them didn't realize this problem at all. There was also a portion that went with the flow because they didn't dare to offend Prince Li, You may rise. Emo Jingli looked down at everyone from high above. He walked to the main seat in the hall and sat down before opening his mouth to speak. Thank you, Regent, everyone said in unison. Ying also sat down on the right side of Emo Jingli. The little Emperor Emo Siyun carefully glanced at Emo Jingli before walking to the empty seat on the left side and sitting down. The people below looked at the little emperor's timid appearance and secretly shook their heads in their hearts. Emo Jingli looked at the guests and courtiers below with satisfaction. He smiled and said, "Everyone, don't be restrained. Just eat and drink to your heart's content." Everyone wrote their thanks to the regent again. Everyone present had a few sources of information. Naturally, they knew what the regent wanted to do by holding this banquet today. Especially those wealthy merchants who were forcibly invited. Their smiles were all stiff. How could they still be in the mood to eat and drink? The atmosphere of the banquet was obviously a little strange. Yili didn't care about it. Her expression was calm as she ate and drank lightly, as if she didn't know the purpose of this banquet at all. In the hall, Emo Jingli looked down from high above. Naturally, he saw everyone's expressions. These few days, Emo Jingli's mood had been very bad. When Dongfang Yu disappeared, although Emo Jingli often wanted to strangle that woman Dongfang Yu to death, when she really disappeared suddenly, many things in Emo Jingli's hands became stagnant. There were many things in the boundless mountain that Dongfang Yu had always held tightly in her hands. Once she was gone, Emo Jingli couldn't mobilize that power at all. There was also the Empress Dowager who publicly fell out with him in the court. Although there was probably no one in Nanjing who didn't know that the relationship between mother and son was bad, but now that he had publicly imprisoned his birth mother, Emo Jingli was condemned by many scholars. At this time, looking at the stiff but obedient expressions of everyone in the hall, Emo Jingli suddenly felt much better. So what if these people opposed him in their hearts? On the surface, didn't they still have to obediently obey his orders and kneel respectfully in front of him? Come, bring him in. In the strange and heavy banquet, Emo Jingli's voice suddenly sounded. After a while, 2 guards of the palace dragged in a middle-aged man covered in wounds and forced him to kneel on the ground. Yili looked at him curiously. She didn't know this person. Master Lin next to her couldn't help but take a breath and whisper, "It's Zhang Baiwan." In the hall, there were many people who had the same expression as Master Lin. Living in Nanjing, as long as there were some famous people, most of them naturally knew each other. Of course, Zhang Baiwan's name was not really Zhang Baiwan. He was a famous grain merchant in Jiangnan. It was said that 60% of the grain stores in Jiangnan belonged to the Zhangs. In Nanjing, he could be regarded as one of the richest merchants. Wealth was not enough to describe him, so he was called Zhang Baiwan. Zhang Baiwan also had a nickname in Nanjing, Money Dead. He was already rich, but he usually dressed simply. Even his wife and children at home lived very simply, as if he was afraid that others would know that he was rich. He could take advantage of others, but if he let others take advantage of him, he wouldn't be able to eat for several days. How could such a person be willing to give Emo Jingli a large amount of money as soldiers' pay? Moreover, Emo Jingli's army was going to war, so they naturally needed grain. Before, Emo Jingli had already sent people to discuss with him, but this person avoided meeting. Today's banquet he simply didn't attend. With Emo Jingli's temperament, how could he tolerate this kind of behavior that dared to challenge him? Therefore, at the regent's residence's banquet, Zhang Baiwan refused to enter the banquet with the invitation, but he was escorted in by others. Emo Jingli coldly glanced at the middle-aged man kneeling on the ground and sneered, "Lord Zhang, it's really hard to invite you?" Zhang Baiwan had a bitter face and said in a trembling voice, "Prince, please forgive this humble one. This humble one doesn't dare. This humble one really doesn't feel well, so... Prince, please forgive this humble one." "Doesn't feel well?" Emo Jingli said, "Is that so? My residence has a few imperial physicians with good medical skills. Why don't you let them take your pulse? That way you won't be left with any illness." "No. I don't dare." Zhang Baiwan's face turned pale as if he really was sick. But how could he dare to let the Li Palace's people take his pulse? At this moment, even if he really had a terminal illness, the Li Palace's imperial physicians would still be very healthy after taking his pulse. Moreover, everyone knew that his unwell words were just an excuse. Chapter 907. Impudent. Emo Jingli's face darkened. He slammed his hand heavily on the armrest. The heavy sound made everyone's heart tremble. Zhang Baiwan's plump body trembled. His face was ashen from fright. I gave you face and you didn't want it. Do you really think I am a pushover? Emo Jingli said darkly. He waved his hand, drag him out for eye and flog him 50 times. I believe that Lord Zhang's body will recover very quickly. 50 flogs. If he really flogged someone like Zhang Baiwan who didn't know martial arts and wasn't young, it would be enough for him to be buried. Even if the Li Palace was merciful, his life would most likely be cut by 70 to 80%. It was obvious that the Li Palace was planning to swallow the entire Zhang family. Everyone's heart trembled. They couldn't help but feel lucky that they didn't do anything stupid. The guards at the side didn't allow Zhang Baiwan to beg for mercy. They directly punished him and dragged him out. Not long after, the heavy sound of flogging and Zhang Baiwan's cries of pain came from outside the door. It was obvious that Emo Jingli wanted to kill the chicken to warn the monkeys. Prince Regent. Just as everyone was trembling in fear and struggling, a clear and low voice sounded in the hall. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice. They saw a young master dressed in white standing up. He said calmly, "The prince is about to go to war. There is no need to lower yourself to the level of an ignorant commoner. I ask the prince to reconsider." Emo Jingli raised an eyebrow. He looked at Yi Li with an indecipherable expression and said, "Young Master Chu wants to plead for mercy for him?" Yi Li smiled and said, "This one is not pleading for Lord Zhang. It's just that the prince's northern expedition is for the foundation of the Dechu state. If Zhang Baiwan is killed, I'm afraid it will affect the prince's reputation." Interesting. Emo Jingli's actions were meant to intimidate the crowd. He had no intention of taking Zhang Baiwan's life. At least he had to keep him alive so that he could leave the Prince Regent's mansion. Hearing Yi Li's words, Emo Jingli raised his hand to signal the people around him to call for a halt. Not long after, Zhang Baiwan was dragged back and thrown to the ground. Although Yi Li begged for mercy, she still received more than 20 beatings. Her clothes were soaked with blood. Emo Jingli looked coldly at the person sprawled on the ground, unable to get up. He said to Yi Li, "My northern expedition was originally to recover the lost land of Dechu State. Now I am only borrowing money from the people in the name of the court. This Zhang Baiwan has repeatedly refused. Does young Master Chu think that such a person should not be beaten?" Yi Li said indifferently, "Such a person naturally deserves to be beaten. However, killing without teaching is called abuse and not abstinence is called violence. Everyone knows that Lord Zhang loves money as much as his life. It is inevitable that he would be muddle-headed for a moment. Now that he has learned his lesson, I believe that Lord Zhang will not disappoint the prince again." "Is that so?" Emo Jingli raised his eyebrows as he looked at Zhang Baiwan. Zhang Baiwan was able to accumulate tens of thousands of assets. He was definitely not an idiot. How could he not know that he had almost lost his life just now? If it wasn't for young Master Chu's pleading, Zhang Baiwan would have become a dead man. When he saw Emo Jingli's gaze sweep over, he nodded and said, "Young Master Chu is right. This humble one was muddle-headed. I beg the prince's forgiveness. This humble one is willing to donate 500,000 dan of grain to the army." The army was given for free. There was no need to return it. Although Emo Jingli had never planned on returning it, it sounded better than borrowing it. However, 500,000? 500,000 dan of grain sounded like a lot. However, it was not even enough to feed hundreds of thousands of soldiers for a month. Naturally, Emo Jingli would not be satisfied. Zhang Baiwan's heart trembled. He said with a sullen face, 1 million dan. Emo Jingli snorted and said with a smile, "If that's the case, I still have to thank Lord Zhang for his righteous actions. In addition, I'm afraid that I will have to trouble Lord Zhang to gather the grain for the army later on. Of course, the imperial court will pay a high price for it." How about it? What else could Zhang Baiwan do other than nod? He naturally knew that Emo Jingli's so-called high price was not something that he could hope for. Even if it was a fair price, he would not be able to get it. In the end, he would still have to pay for it. He was only afraid that after Prince Li finished the war, the Zhang family would still have some money left. With Zhang Baiwan's lesson, the wealthy merchants present were naturally more tactful. There was no need for Emo Jingli to say anything. They all began to donate money and goods. Most of them were even gifts. Although these people were probably cursing Mo Jingli's 8 generations of ancestors in their hearts, on the surface, they still had to carefully smile. They were afraid that if Mo Jingli was angered, it would be difficult for them to even walk out of the Li Palace alive. After a while, Yili did a rough calculation in her heart. The people present had been forced to donate 5 to 6 million taels of silver. There were also countless other things. With such a rich income, Mo Jingli's gloomy face became much better. Yili also very tactfully donated 50,000 taels of silver. Although Mo Jingli was slightly dissatisfied, he also thought that Chu Junwei was away from home. 50,000 taels of silver was already a lot of face. Moreover, Chu Junwei's words just now could be considered as giving Mo Jingli a way out. This caused Mo Jingli to have a good impression of him. Thus he did not say anything else. Of course, this 50,000 taels of silver was given by Master Lin, who was sitting next to Yi Li. Master Lin had lost 450,000 taels of silver in one banquet. His heart ached so much that his face was about to turn green. Everyone present knew that this money was like throwing meat buns at a dog. It was gone forever. Fortunately, Jiangnan had always been a land of wealth. Although these wealthy merchants had lost a lot, they could still bear it. If it was Nanzhao or Xiling, these people would have rebelled without waiting for Mo Jingli's northern expedition. After getting what he wanted, Mo Jingli was no longer in the mood to drink and eat with these people. After toasting a cup of wine, he stood up and left. Everyone present actually had a stomachache from eating, but no one dared to immediately stand up and leave. Prince Li had just left and you were already leaving. Weren't you clearly dissatisfied with Prince Li? Since ancient times, the idea that the poor should not fight with the rich, and the rich should not fight with the officials had long been deeply ingrained in people's bones. As long as it was not that they could not survive, ordinary commoners would not easily be willing to become enemies with the imperial court. Thus, everyone absent-mindedly looked at the singing and dancing in front of them while silently vomiting blood for the wealth they had lost. The most relaxed person present was probably Yi Li. Although Mo Jingli had left, Yi Ying and the little emperor remained at the banquet. After all, it was the regent's residence's banquet. Could not be without a host. However, Yi Li's current attire was not suitable for her to talk to Yi Ying. Her gaze calmly swept past Yi Li, who was sitting in a daze in his chair. A faint smile appeared on Yi Li's lips. Why did the emperor appear at the regent's residence today? Yi Li asked curiously. Master Lin hurriedly explained in a low voice. I heard that the regent and the Empress Dowager had a falling out. He said that the Empress Dowager was soft-hearted and did not know how to teach the emperor. He planned to bring the emperor with him and teach him personally. Teach him personally? Mo Jingli was actually planning to scare the little emperor to death. Furthermore, the Empress Dowager was soft-hearted. Mo Jingli had probably forgotten that he was also taught by that soft-hearted woman. Chapter 908. That's right. It's not easy to be born in the royal family. Old Master Lin looked at the dazed little emperor and shook his head. Even a fool could see that the little emperor was simply a puppet that could not be supported. When he faced Prince Li, he was frightened like a cicada in winter. Prince Li probably did not treat the little emperor well. It was better if he stayed in the royal palace with the Empress Dowager and Empress Dowager watching over him. Now that he was in the princely manner, who knew how long he could live? Yi Li lowered her head and thought for a while. She looked at Wei Lin behind her. Wei Lin went forward and bowed. Yi Li whispered a few words in Wei Lin's ear. Wei Lin nodded silently and returned to his original position. Old Master Lin looked curiously at the two guards behind Yi Li. He felt that this young Master Chu was more and more mysterious. Young Master Chu, Zhang Baiwan, who had just been beaten, came over with a pale face. He smiled and said, Thank you, young Master Chu, for putting in a good word for me in front of the regent. Because Zhang Baiwan had just offended Mo Jingli, no one dared to say anything to him. And Zhang Baiwan did not have a good relationship with others. Otherwise, even if he was confused at that time, someone would have reminded him. Zhang Baiwan was most likely used as a pawn by these people. But the banquet was not over yet. Zhang Baiwan, who was injured, did not dare to leave. He sat alone in a corner and looked very miserable. At this time he reluctantly came forward to thank Yi Li. Yi Li smiled and nodded. Lord Zhang, you don't have to be so polite. It was just a small matter. Zhang Baiwan smiled bitterly and said, Young master's effort saved this old man's life. In the future, if young Master Chu needs anything, I will not refuse. Yili snickered. This Zhang Baiwan wasn't really muddle-headed. However, she didn't take his last sentence seriously. With Zhang Baiwan's money-loving personality, he wouldn't suddenly change just because of a beating. I wouldn't dare. Lord Zhang, you don't have to be so polite. Zhang Baiwan looked at Lord Lin beside him and said with a smile, if young Master Chu has the time, this old man will prepare a small banquet for young Master Chu. Yili pondered for a moment and said with a smile, if that's the case, I'll have to trouble Lord Zhang then. Seeing that Yili had agreed, Zhang Baiwan happily returned to his seat. Old Master Lin looked at Zhang Baiwan and couldn't help but laugh. I didn't expect this Zhang Baiwan to be so generous after being beaten up. I'm afraid that after so many years, young Master Chu is the first person who is fortunate enough to be treated by him willingly. Yili smiled faintly and said, Mr. Lin is joking. Old Master Lin shook his head and said, this Zhang Baiwan has never done anything without benefits. Young Master Chu should be careful. Yili nodded and thanked Old Master Lin for his reminder. Although Old Master Lin also had some other thoughts, he reminded her with good intentions in the end. In this world there was no kindness without a reason. Zhang Baiwan was also considered a celebrity in Nanjing. Yili naturally had some understanding of him. It was true that he was grateful to her for saving his life, but she was afraid that he was more interested in the Chu family. Old Master Lin thought for a moment and looked at Yili with a smile. He whispered with a smile, I heard that Zhang Baiwan seems to have a young lady waiting to be betrothed. Although he didn't say the rest of the words, Yili already understood his meaning. In fact, after seeing Yili today, there were many people who had such thoughts. After all, although Chu Junwei was only a side branch of the Chu family, his background was not something that merchants like them who were looked down upon by others could compare to. Moreover, this young Master Chu was handsome and elegant. Even King Li seemed to treat this young master with respect. Needless to say, the Chu family and the Su family were inextricably linked in countless ways. Such a good son-in-law was naturally the object of everyone's desire. Even Old Master Lin himself had such thoughts. It was a pity that he had 2 daughters. His elder daughter had already married a few years ago, while his younger daughter was not even 10 years old. He could only sigh and wring his wrists. Hearing Old Master Lin's words, Yili couldn't help but be stunned and speechless. She really hadn't thought about this problem. After all, no matter how much she pretended to be a man, she was still a woman. No woman would think that someone would want to marry their daughter to her. But now, hearing Old Master Lin's words, Yili turned to look at Zhuojing and Wei Lin. The two of them also had strange expressions. After a while, Wei Lin slowly said, Gongzi's style is outstanding and his handsomeness is matchless. Naturally, he is the object of admiration of many parents. So Wang Yi not only had to guard against men but also against women? Wei Lin and Zhuojing couldn't help but secretly sympathize with their prince. Yili shook her head helplessly and said with a smile, Thank you for your reminder, Old Master Lin. This one understands. Old Master Lin chuckled. He covered his mouth and said in a low voice, This one was just saying something for nothing. Originally, I said that I would rather tear down a temple than ruin a marriage. However, this daughter of Zhang Baiwan. Young master, please reconsider. In the opposite corner, Zhang Baiwan obviously noticed that Old Master Lin might be talking about his family. He glared at him fiercely. Old Master Lin didn't mind and continued to drink his wine. Yili shook her head helplessly and raised her wine cup to Zhang Baiwan. Everyone present was surprised to see this. They didn't expect young Master Chu to see the stingy and miserly Zhang Baiwan in a different light. Chapter 909. On the morning of the second day, Yili received an invitation from the Zhang Fu as expected. An invitation for Master Chu Junwei to attend a banquet in the afternoon. Seeing the plain invitation, Yili couldn't help but shake her head and laugh inside. This Zhang Baiwan was really cunning. It hadn't even been a day and he probably hadn't even recovered from the wounds inflicted by Mo Jingli's people. Is Master going to attend the banquet? Wei Lin asked curiously. Yili put down the invitation and said with a smile, Of course I'm going. Didn't you hear Master Lin say? This is the first time Zhang Baiwan has taken the initiative to invite. How can we not give face? Wei Lin was non-committal. In any case, if Wang Fei was going, they just needed to follow and protect her. With Zhang Baiwan's abilities, he couldn't pose any danger to Wang Fei. Even if Zhang Baiwan really wanted to marry his daughter to Wang Fei, cough cough, Wang Fei couldn't marry him. Master Shiyard has woken up. As she spoke, the servant girl taking care of Princess Xixia came to report. Wei Lin said with slight shock, "She's very lucky she actually managed to survive." It wasn't that Wei Lin disliked Princess Xixia and wanted her to die, but Princess Xixia's wounds really weren't light. The external wounds weren't fatal, but after the wounds became infected, Princess Xixia developed a high fever and didn't wake up. So many days had passed. Even the doctors in the Fu had given up. They could only take care of her since she hadn't died. Unexpectedly, when everyone had given up, she had woken up. The servant girl said with a strange expression, "But that girl seems a bit strange." "Strange? What is it? Is she stupid, crazy, or has she lost her memories?" Wei Lin asked. The servant girl shook her head and said with a slight nod, "She's stupid. No, she probably has lost her memories." Yili stood and said, "Let's go take a look." When they came to Shiyard, they heard sobbing before they entered. However, the sobbing didn't sound like Princess Xixia's sobbing. Mainly, with Princess Xixia's age and personality, she definitely wouldn't cry so loudly. When they stepped in, they saw the mess in the room. Yili stood at the door and frowned as she looked at the woman hiding at the foot of the bed. Her eyes were clear and bright. She definitely didn't have the eyes of a lunatic or a fool. However, the expression on his face was indeed a little strange. Seeing them come in, the woman who was hiding at the foot of the bed and crying immediately stopped and stared at them vigilantly. Yili tried calling out, "Princess Xixia, are you feeling better?" Princess Xixia pursed her lips and suddenly threw herself at Yili. "Young master, be careful." Wei Lin was shocked and he kicked the person who was pouncing over. "Wei Lin, don't." Yili hurriedly cried out. Wei Lin was taken aback and hurriedly withdrew some of his strength. However, he still sent Princess Xixia flying with a kick. But because he had held back 80 to 90% of his strength, he didn't fall too hard. Princess Xixia clearly didn't expect to be sent flying with a kick. She sat on the ground in a daze for a while before suddenly bursting into tears. "Ooh. Royal sister, bad people bullied Xia." Wei Lin stilled. He turned back to look at Yili and said, "So she really is dumb?" With Princess Xixia's personality, how could she act like this in front of outsiders? She really sat on the ground and started crying. Yili looked down and said, "I feel that there is a difference between this and being dumb. Xixia, do you recognize me?" Xixia was too focused on crying. When she heard Yili's words, she hiccuped and looked dazedly at Yili. She suddenly reached out to grab Yili's face. "Brother, you're so beautiful." Yili raised his fan to block her hand. He looked at her with a smile and said, "Does Xixia recognize brother?" Princess Xixia blinked in puzzlement. She bit her lip and shook her head. "Who are you?" "I am the Princess of Nanzhao. You are not allowed to bully me. I want to find my royal sister." "Do you still remember your royal sister's name?" Yili asked. Princess Xixia rolled her eyes and gave her an expression that said, "You were dumb." She said proudly, "Of course my royal sister is Princess Anqi of Nanzhao. My royal sister is very powerful. If you dare to bully my royal sister, she will definitely have people beat you." Yili couldn't help but lower her head and laugh. "I am good friends with your royal sister. But how come I don't know that she has a younger sister?" "Nonsense. All of Nanzhao knows that this princess is Princess Xixia." Princess Xixia glared angrily. Yili nodded and said, "All right, but I am not from Nanzhao. If you really are Princess Xixia, I will send you back to see Princess Anqi. How old is Princess Xixia this year? Why are you here?" Princess Xixia grabbed her hair and said with some distress, 7 years old. "I don't know. My royal sister said that she would celebrate my birthday. Woo-woo." Thinking of something, Princess Xixia pouted and looked like she was about to cry again. Yili thought and asked, "Does Xixia know Emo Jingli and Dongfang Yu? Then who is it?" Princess Xixia asked without much interest. "Brother, are you going to send me home? I will have royal father and royal sister reward you heavily." Yili smiled faintly and said, "It doesn't matter who it is. Xixia, rest well first. When you are better, I will send you back." She pointed at the wounds on her body. Although they had healed a lot these days, they still hurt. Reminded by Yili, Princess Xixia looked at the wounds on her body and wanted to cry again. After coaxing her with great difficulty, Yili let out a sigh of relief and took Wei Lin out. Wei Lin said with some confusion, "What is going on with this Princess Xixiao? Is she pretending?" Yili shook her head and said, "Princess Xixiao's brain can't make such a perfect disguise. Just now when I asked her if she knew Mo Jingli and Dongfang Yu, her eyes didn't change at all. He's pretending. Princess Xixiao is too good at acting." That's true. Princess Xixiao had almost died at the hands of Dongfang Yu. She absolutely hated Dongfang Yu to the bone. Even if she was good at acting, it was impossible to not have any feelings. "Send someone to watch over her. When we leave Jiangnan, send someone to send her back to Nanzhao," Yili said. "Yes." Wei Lin nodded and said, "Young master, it's time to go to the Zhang mansion for the banquet." They had wasted a lot of time at Princess Xixiao's place. In the blink of an eye, it was already afternoon. Yili had to change her clothes and go out for the banquet. Zhang Baiwan really deserved the reputation of being the stingiest and stingiest in Nanjing. The entire Zhang mansion looked simple and unadorned. Even the inside of the mansion was ordinary. If people didn't know, they would never think that this was the mansion of one of the richest merchants in Nanjing. The servants in the mansion were also like kittens. Looking at the housekeeper who was leading the way wearing old clothes with patches, Yili couldn't help but twitch her lips. Probably because Yili's expression was too explicit, the housekeeper embarrassedly pulled at his clothes and whispered, "Young master, you must be joking. In fact, we are usually not so rude. It's just that yesterday master," to prevent master from feeling uncomfortable, so. Chapter 9-10. Yili suddenly understood. It turned out that Zhang Baiwan had lost a lot of money yesterday. The servants in the residence were afraid that they would be an eyesore to the master, so they specially found these clothes to wear, so as not to make the master unhappy. Yili smiled and said, "This one was rude. Being thrifty is always a good thing." The housekeeper smiled helplessly. Being thrifty was naturally a good thing, but with the Zhang family's wealth and status in Nanjing, they were often ridiculed because of this. They had long been used to it. Zhang Baiwan had already been waiting in the hall with his wife and daughter. Looking at Madame Zhang and young Miss Zhang, Yili suddenly had a deeper understanding of Zhang Baiwan's stinginess. Because of his injury, Zhang Baiwan's face was still a little pale, but when he saw Yili come in, his face was full of smiles and was very attentive. "Young Master Chu has come. This old one did not come out to welcome you. Please forgive me." Yili cupped her hands and smiled. "Lord Zhang is too polite. This one is Chu Junwei. Greetings to Madam and young Miss Zhang." Zhang Baiwan was very happy and said to his daughter, "Zhu quickly greet young Master Chu." Young Miss Zhang very shyly stepped forward and bowed. "Zhu greets young Master Chu." When she saw young Miss Zhang, Yili finally understood why Master Lin had a strange expression when he mentioned Zhang Baiwan's daughter. In all fairness, young Miss Zhang's appearance was not ugly. Although she could not be considered a stunning beauty, she should be a delicate and pretty woman. However, this young lady gave off a very strange feeling. Even someone as calm as Yili couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat when she stared at her. Yili's eyes twitched and she inadvertently took a step back. Young Miss Zhang is too polite. Then she turned her gaze to Zhang Baiwan, swearing not to look at young Miss Zhang again. Seeing that Yili wasn't looking at her, Miss Zhang's eyes reddened. Zhang Baiwan looked at Yili, then at his daughter. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He smiled at Yili and said, "Young Master Chu, why don't we take a seat first?" Yili smiled and said, "Lord Zhang, please." Because only Yili was invited, Lord Zhang brought Mrs. Zhang and Miss Zhang to the table. The banquet wasn't very sumptuous, but it wasn't disrespectful. It seemed that even though Lord Zhang was stingy, he was still aware of the situation. After Yili sat down, Miss Zhang happened to sit beside her. This made Yili's body stiffen again. "Young Master Chu Zhuker will pour some wine for you." Miss Zhang picked up the wine jug and eagerly poured some wine for Yili. Yili could only thank her. She sighed and went straight to the point with Lord Zhang. If Lord Zhang really said that he was planning to marry his daughter to her, it would be ugly. "Lord Zhang, actually, this one is here today because I have some important matters to discuss with Lord Zhang." Lord Zhang was taken aback. He smiled and said, "What is it? Why don't we talk after the meal?" Yili said calmly, "If it's about the 1,000,000 grains that Lord Zhang donated to Prince Li yesterday?" Zhang Baiwan's face immediately darkened. Just thinking about that 1,000,000 grains made his heart bleed. What does young Master Chu want to talk about? Zhang Baiwan looked at Yi Li in confusion. Yi Li asked with a smile, is it convenient to talk here? Zhang Baiwan hesitated for a moment. In the end he still looked at his wife and daughter and said, Madam, please bring Zhuge down first. I have something to discuss with young Master Chu. Madame Zhang was just an ordinary woman in her boudoir. She treated her husband as her sky and did not know anything about business. She could only pull the somewhat unwilling Miss Zhang away. What does young Master Chu want to talk to this old man about? Zhang Baiwan asked. Yi Li smiled and said, yesterday Lord Zhang donated 1 million grains to Prince Li. But according to this one's knowledge, Prince Li is sending out at least 800,000 soldiers this time. Taking everything into account, even if everything goes smoothly and we can agree to the Mahist army in the shortest time possible, it will still take at least half a year. In this period of time, the amount of grain needed is at least 3 million grains. And this is the most conservative estimate. Does Lord Zhang think that Prince Li's mansion can defeat the Prince Ding mansion in half a year? Zhang Baiwan looked at him with some vigilance and said, what does young master mean? Yi Li smiled and said, this one also has another piece of news. This time, the army has set out, but the imperial court did not transfer much grain from the granaries of various places. Because this year Xiling is suffering from drought and a lack of harvest. The situation of the northern tribes is also not very good. I think that Lord Zhang has some understanding of the grain business. The imperial court sold a large portion of the grain that had just entered the warehouse to Xiling a month ago. So, this conservative estimate of 3 million grains. In the end, I am afraid that Lord Zhang and the grain merchants of Jiangnan will have to bear the cost. Zhang Baiwan's face darkened when he heard this. Prince Li wants to destroy my Zhang family. Donating 1 million grains had already greatly damaged the vitality of the Zhang family. If the Zhang family had to bear the cost of all the grain, the Zhang family would probably be finished. More importantly, the Zhang family would not be able to gather so much grain in such a short time. When the time came, the crime of delaying military plans would be brought down. Zhang Baiwan's head would still roll. As expected, Prince Li did not plan to let him go from the beginning. Not only that, but, honestly speaking, this one can say that this war is not something that can be finished in a year or so. When the time comes, the Zhang family. Zhang Baiwan's face was ashen. He looked at Yi Li and said, young Master Chu, you did not come here just to scare me, did you? Zhang Baiwan was also a shrewd businessman. He naturally knew that Yi Li would not come here just to play with him. Yi Li lowered his eyes and said lightly, this one does have a way to help Lord Zhang, but I don't know if Lord Zhang is willing. Please save me, young Master Chu. Zhang Baiwan hurriedly said. Yi Li smiled and handed over an envelope. Zhang Baiwan took it and skimmed through it. His face could not help but change. He stared at Yi Li and said, young Master Chu, you are? Yi Li smiled and said, this one's surname is Chu. The Chu family and the Su family are related by marriage. Zhang Baiwan understood. His expression kept changing. After a while he asked, can young Master Chu make the decision? Yi Li smiled and took out a token from his sleeve and placed it on the table. Zhang Baiwan stared at the black jade token with a murderous look on it. Even though he had never seen the Prince Ding Mansion's token, Zhang Baiwan really did not think that anyone in this world would dare to copy the Prince Ding Mansion's token. Also, the Chu family and the Su family were related by marriage. With the Su family's position in Li City, the possibility of Chu Jungwei working for the Prince Ding Mansion was much higher than coming all the way to Jiangnan to rely on the Li Palace. What does Lord Zhang think? Yi Li asked. If this old one does not agree, what does young Master Chu plan to do? Zhang Baiwan asked. Yi Li said calmly, then I ask Lord Zhang to forget what happened today. Zhang Baiwan said in a low voice, this old one needs to think about it. Yi Li did not waste time. He stood and said, since it is like this one will leave first. Zhang Baiwan looked at Yi Li and said with some luck, actually, if young Master Chu can agree to this old one's request, this old one can give you an answer right now. Seeing Zhang Baiwan's satisfied and expectant gaze, Yi Li rolled his eyes in his heart. He quickly said, Lord Zhang, please forgive me. This one is just running errands. If Lord Zhang has any request, this one can pass it on for you. But if it has to do with me, I'm afraid, please forgive me, Lord Zhang. Chapter 9:11. Zhang Baiwan could only sigh. His disappointment was obvious. He really hoped that Chu Junwei could become the son-in-law of the Zhang family. In this way the Zhang family would have more protection. Moreover, his daughter had high standards. Ordinary men would not enter her eyes. Unfortunately, after leaving the Zhang family, Yili, Wei Lin and Zhuijing could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Zhuijing said that Miss Zhang's eyes were almost glued to young master. Fortunately, young master saw the opportunity and sent her away. Otherwise it would be really troublesome. Being handsome was also a mistake. They really did not know how young master Qingchen had survived all these years. No wonder he provoked a crazy woman like Dong Fangyu. However, princess consort dressed as a man was worse than young master Qingchen. Young master Qingchen's immortal aura made people look up to him and dare not blaspheme him. However, princess consort dressed as a man was handsome and amiable. She was simply the best candidate for a good son-in-law. Princess consort, what if Zhang Baiwan runs to tell on us? Wei Lin frowned. Yili said indifferently, then we can only let Lord Zhang be a real money grubber. But I think he is a smart person. Wei Lin thought for a moment and said, yes, and with his money-grubbing temper, how could he send himself in when he knows that Mo Jingli wants to swallow up his Zhang family? Yili sighed and said lightly, it will be much easier to deal with the Zhang family and the Lin family. The Zhang family and the Lin family could be regarded as the richest in Nanjing. With their secret help, there was no need to worry about not being able to poke a big hole in Mo Jingli's logistics. Everything was carried out in secret in an orderly manner. Ever since he had been in the limelight at the regent's residence's banquet, Mo Jingli seemed to have remembered this young master from Yunzhou's Chu family. From time to time he would send people to invite him to the residence to talk and ask for some opinions on political affairs. However, Yili was still a little worried that Mo Jingli would see through her and reveal something. Most of the time she refused. Only when she really could not refuse would she go once. However, he did not expect that because of this, Mo Jingli valued him even more. It seemed like Mo Jingli also wanted to play a show of being courteous to the wise. Perhaps he was really worried that the Empress Dowager would affect the little emperor, so Mo Jingli really left the little emperor in the regent's residence. She would only bring it to the palace when she went to court every day. Although there were many people in the court who objected to this, Mo Jingli controlled all of the Dechu state's military power. Political power came from the barrel of a gun. This had always been the case in ancient times. Since ancient times, how many literati revolted successfully? Yili had also seen the little emperor once in the prince regent's residence. Compared to the last time she saw him at the banquet, he was even more weak and thin. Very quickly, news spread from the Li Palace that the little emperor had been poisoned with a slow-acting poison. When they received the news from the Li Palace, everyone could not help but be stunned. Wei Lin frowned. What exactly does Mo Jingli want to do? The eve of an expedition was the time when stability was required. Now that the little emperor had been poisoned to death, it was not a good thing for Mo Jingli. How much longer can Mo Siyun last? Yili asked in a low voice. Yaoji, who had come with Qin Feng, shook her head. Although the poison in the little emperor's body is slow-acting, it is still somewhat strong. Also, the little emperor seems to have some innate deficiencies. These 2 years he has been greatly frightened by Mo Jingli. I'm afraid, even if the poison is cured, he won't be able to live to adulthood. Yaoji herself was the mother of a child, and she had not seen her own son for many years. She naturally felt more heartache for a child. Speaking of which, in this messy dispute, the most innocent person was the little emperor, who was only 8 or 9 years old. A child who did not know anything, without the love of his father, without the support of his mother, was suddenly pushed to the position of emperor before Mo Jingqi's death. What was waiting for him? As long as one had eyes, they could see clearly. Yili was silent. She had never been a heartless person. But to this child, although she could not say that she had harmed him, she had absolutely left him in the lurch. Everyone for their own goals. The Empress Dowager for her own power, Mo Jingli for his high position, and she for the Prince Ding mansion had all chosen to give up this child. Princess, Mo Siyun's matter has nothing to do with us. Princess, why do you blame yourself? Qin Feng said in a low voice. Yili shook her head and smiled indifferently. I don't blame myself, but I'm a little emotional. He's just a child who doesn't know anything. Why was he born in the emperor's family? Yili rarely blamed herself. Self-blame was a kind of useless guilt. Instead of blaming herself, it was better not to do so in the first place. Since she had chosen, what was the use of blaming herself? Yaoji, go and tell Ying. Give me the list in her hand. I'll tell her the child's whereabouts immediately. If it's too late, she'll regret it. Yili said lightly. Yaoji frowned and said, I'm afraid Ying won't agree. She may not trust Princess in her heart. Now the list in her hand can be said to be the most important thing she can hold. She certainly won't give it out easily. Princess, you seem to consider telling her the child's news first? Yili sighed and said, if we tell her the child's news now, we really can't get the news. And, even you and many people in Nanjing will be in danger. Yaoji frowned and was somewhat puzzled. Qin Feng said, if we tell Ying that her son is the little emperor, how can she help the Prince Ding mansion? The first thing she has to do is to tell this news to Mo Jingli. Now Princess Xixia is dead and Dongfang Yu is missing. Once the little emperor becomes Mo Jingli's son, Yaoji suddenly realized. She had spent a lot of time with Ying. She naturally understood Ying's temperament. Ying was timid and not very smart. It was difficult for her to achieve great things. But she was selfish and didn't trust anyone at all. When necessary, she was ruthless enough. If her son became the emperor, she would be the Empress Dowager. Naturally, she didn't need to care about the Prince Ding mansion. Yaoji sighed helplessly and said, I'll go back and tell her. She only hoped that Ying would be rational and not harm her son. Princess, what does Mo Jingli want to do to the little emperor now? It can't be that he can't wait and wants to ascend the throne immediately, right? If the little emperor dies in his princely mansion, he will be suspected. Zhuijing was puzzled and said, Mo Jingli always liked to be smart. He didn't seem like someone who didn't understand such a simple principle. Yili shook her head and said in a low voice, in fact, it may not be Mo Jingli who poisoned him. Someone wants to frame Mo Jingli? Everyone was puzzled. Qin Feng frowned and said, since Dongfang Yu disappeared, Mo Jingli has vigorously reorganized the princely mansion again. Now it can be said that the princely mansion is completely under Mo Jingli's control. Even we can find out the news, Mo Jingli can't not know. Chapter 9:12. Yili pondered for a long time before raising her brows. There's another person in the Li Palace who can act against Mo Siyun. Even if Mo Jingli knows, he won't expose her. Besides, if the little emperor dies like this, it's not necessarily a bad thing for Mo Jingli. Xian Zhao Grand Concubine? Lin Han asked. Yili nodded. That's right. Right now, the only people in the Li Palace who can act against Mo Siyun are Mo Jingli, Ying, and Xian Zhao Grand Concubine. It's not easy to administer a slow-acting poison. Takes a lot of time. Even if the little emperor has no power, there are still many people serving him. Normal people definitely can't put the poison in Mo Siyun's food at the right time every day. Why does Xian Zhao Grand Concubine want to kill the little emperor? Wei Lin didn't understand. Yili smiled. Xian Zhao Grand Concubine and the Empress Dowager are cousins. That year they entered the palace together to serve the late emperor. Can be said that for most of their lives they supported each other through thick and thin. After Mo Jingqi ascended the throne, the Empress Dowager became the Empress Dowager and conferred Xian Zhao Grand Concubine as Grand Concubine. She moved out of the palace to live in the Li Palace. Compared to the other concubines of the late emperor, she's considered quite good. However, I've always had a question. In Dechu State, the lowest rank of concubines is Chiron. The highest is Empress. Below the Empress there are Gui Fei and Fei. According to convention, after the late emperor passed away, concubines were conferred one level higher. In other words, under normal circumstances, Xian Zhao Grand Concubine was a concubine when the late emperor was alive. Then Mo Jingqi should confer her the title of Gui Fei. However, why did Xian Zhao Grand Concubine remain a concubine her entire life? Yaoji supported her chin. At that time no one raised any objections. That means it's reasonable to confer this title. Yili said, it's reasonable but not appropriate. Moreover, at that time the late emperor's concubines were all demoted or killed by the Empress Dowager for various reasons. The only one left, Xian Zhao Grand Concubine, was given the grace of leaving the palace to live in luxury. It seems that she was naturally favored, but no one noticed this. Why do you think? The Empress Dowager wants to send the virtuous old concubine out of the palace. Yaoji blinked her eyes and said in surprise, Empress Dowager, you don't want the virtuous old concubine to stay in the palace to fight for power with you? Then, the virtuous old concubine must have something on her that made the Empress Dowager not dare to touch her. That was why he had been living a peaceful life for so many years. Now that she has made a move on Mo Jingli, is it because she wants to push Mo Jingli onto the throne, and also because she wants to take revenge on the Empress Dowager? A Huang Yuing is an eternal story. However, I have never seen the existence of the so-called a Huang and vying. Yili sighed softly. As long as she was a woman she would be jealous. How could she have a deep sisterly relationship with another woman who shared a husband with her without the slightest grudge? Moreover, she was a woman in the palace. From the first day they entered the palace, there was only one thing they did: fight. Fight for favor, fight for status, fight for children. Mo Jingli is also the Empress Dowager's son. Wei Lin reminded. The virtuous old concubine Zhao did not have a child. No matter how deep she hid, she had already lost from the beginning. Giving birth to grace, raising grace, which is more important? Is Mo Jingli's current choice not enough to prove it? Yili smiled. Yaoji frowned and said, when the capital was just moved to Nanjing, it was said that Li Wang wanted to confer the title of Imperial Concubine Zhao to Imperial Concubine Zhao and control the harem together with the Empress Dowager. Later, I don't know why there was no news. Everyone present couldn't help but shake their heads. The imperial family's affairs were so complicated that it made them feel dizzy. Although the virtuous old concubine Zhao did not have a son, she had been playing the role of a sisterly relationship under the suppression of the Empress Dowager for many years. Presumably she finally could not bear it anymore. However, they did not know that the relationship between Mo Jingli and the Empress Dowager was broken. How much effort did the virtuous old concubine Zhao contribute to it? Reporting to Gongzi, someone from the regent's residence came. He said that the regent asked for him. The steward outside the door reported in a low voice. Yili was silent for a moment, then nodded and said, I know, ask them to wait for a moment. The steward responded and left. Yili stood up and said, fine, I can go to the Li Wang residence to see what is going on. Yaoji frowned and said, Li Wang seems to often summon the princess these days. Will he see any flaws? With Mo Jingli's temperament, if he really saw any flaws he would not be so polite to invite you. Don't worry. Yili said with a smile. When she arrived at the Li Wang residence, Yili was directly invited to Mo Jingli's study. When she stepped into the study there were already many people inside. However, Yili was only familiar with one person, the current Marquis Muyang. Chu Jungwei greets the regent. Yili cupped her hands and said. When Mo Jingli saw Yili come in, he seemed to be in a good mood and said, Gongzi Chu is here, please take a seat. Yili nodded and thanked him, then walked to the last seat and sat down. Although the Chu family was a famous family, the people present were all Mo Jingli's confidants. Yili naturally would not sit at the front without knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. Coincidentally, Yili sat diagonally across from Muyang. Muyang smiled and nodded at him. Yili also did not want to brush him off, so she smiled and nodded. Mo Jingli raised his eyebrows and looked at the two, asking, Marquis Muyang and Gongzi Chu know each other? Muyang said respectfully, Gongzi Chu is so elegant, I only regret not meeting you. Yili smiled and said, Marquis Muyang is overpraising me. I have long admired Marquis Muyang's great name. Seeing that the two did not look fake, Mo Jingli nodded with satisfaction. He did not object to the relationship between the house of Marquis Muyang and the Chu family, but he was not happy that Muyang was too close to the Chu family behind his back. Yili took the opportunity to ask, I wonder what prince summoned me for? Mo Jingli glanced at the crowd and said, this time, there is indeed something I need Gongzi Chu's help with. Previously, regarding the Zhang family, Gongzi Chu solved a big problem for I with just a few words. These days, Zhang Baiwan has been working very hard. This is all thanks to Gongzi Chu. Yili declined modestly, Prince is overpraising. This is all thanks to the prince's power to deter Jiangnan. I dare not claim the credit. Mo Jingli sighed and said, I indeed have something important I need Gongzi Chu's help with. I hope Gongzi Chu will not decline. Yili's heart skipped a beat, but he said calmly, I await prince's orders. Mo Jingli stared at Yili without moving and said in a deep voice, I would like to ask Gongzi Chu to write an imperial edict for me. Yili's heart shook. He glanced at the people present. There was no change in their expressions. He knew that these people all knew what Emo Jingli wanted to say. Or it could be said that these people were waiting for him. Yili took a deep breath and asked, "There are many talents in the imperial court. There are countless seniors who can write an imperial edict for me. I'm afraid. Is Gongzi Chu unwilling?" Emo Jingli's face darkened as he asked lightly. Yili sighed helplessly in his heart. He already understood what Emo Jingli wanted him to write. But this thing could not be written. Once it was written, then the little Emperor Emo Siyun would probably die. Chapter 9:13. What imperial edict does Prince want this humble one to write? Zhuo Jing and Wei Lin were not allowed to enter the Li Palace's study, so they could only wait outside. Moreover, even if they were by her side, Yili did not plan on shedding all pretense of cordiality with Emo Jingli so quickly. Emo Jingli's expression finally relaxed and he said with a bit of sadness, "To be honest, His Majesty's health has not been good these days. I'm afraid. His Majesty is still young, so he naturally does not have an heir. Thus he intends to abdicate the throne. I would like to ask young Master Chu to write an imperial edict for me. Young Master Chu is a descendant of a prestigious family, so I believe that you will not disappoint I." Emo Jingli's attitude made Yili feel even more disgusted. He was clearly very pleased with himself, but he still pretended to be sad. Which imperial son of the previous emperor does His Majesty intend to abdicate the throne to? Yili's expression did not change as she asked innocently. The emperor did not have an heir, so the throne could only be passed down to someone else. However, it was usually passed down to the person closest to him by blood. Brothers first, then nephews. It was rare for the throne to be passed down to an uncle. Yili's question was not considered rude. A trace of coldness flashed through Emo Jingli's eyes, but he did not answer Yili's question. Mu Yang, who was sitting across from him, smiled and said, "Young Master Tu misunderstands. His Majesty intends to abdicate the throne to the Prince Regent. After all, most of His Majesty's brothers are still young. The Chu state is currently in a precarious situation, so it really needs a capable ruler. Although His Majesty is still young, he is wholeheartedly thinking for the Chu state." "For the Chu state's territory? He's probably scared by you, right?" Yili laughed coldly in her heart. Glancing at Emo Jingli with some hesitation, Yili pretended to be in a difficult position and said, "Prince, please forgive me. At this time I'm afraid this one will need to discuss this with the main family. What's more, even though I'm a member of the Chu family, I'm only from a side branch of the family. Something like an abdication edict. Since ancient times there weren't many emperors who were willing to abdicate the throne. In order to show that they had the support of the people, the edict naturally had to be written by someone with more influence. However, there were some things that were written well that would be passed down to later generations, but there were also some that would go down in infamy for 10,000 years. Although Yili had borrowed the identity of a member of the Chu family, she had no intention of tarnishing their reputation. If he was smart enough, the edict Emo Jingli wanted him to write would probably be put under the name of the Chu family's direct descendant. The world would only know that it was written by a member of the Chu family. Who cared if Chu Junwei was a direct descendant or a side branch of the family? Did he even exist in the Chu family? Actually, it wasn't that Emo Jingli wanted to force Yili to write this edict. It was that he couldn't find a suitable person to write it. The old officials in the court naturally wouldn't be willing to sacrifice their reputation to write this edict. However, most of Emo Jingli's trusted subordinates didn't have any reputation. Even though Chu Junwei was a side branch of the Chu family, he still had the name of the Chu family. The Chu family could be considered one of the top families in the Chu state other than the Su family. If he could find young Master Qing Chen to write the edict, Emo Jingli wouldn't need to care if Yili was willing or not. Emo Jingli stared at Yili with displeasure and said, "It's just a small matter. Young Master Chu is avoiding it in every way possible. Are you looking down on I?" Yili really wanted to slap Emo Jingli's face. If the person here was really just a side branch young master of the Chu family, Emo Jingli would set up such a situation. If the Chu family's young master was found to be in cahoots, he would have no choice but to commit suicide. "Prince's words are too serious," Yili said firmly, "but this matter is of great importance. This one really doesn't dare to act on my own accord. Prince doesn't want news to spread that the Chu family has expelled Junwei from the family right after this one writes the edict, right? If this was true, then the entire Chu family would give Mo Jingli a hard slap in the face. At that time, the situation would be even uglier than just casually pulling someone to write the edict. Not to mention anything else, if the Su family took the opportunity to say something, most of the scholars in the world wouldn't listen to Mo Jingli. Mo Jingli also knew that Yi Li was speaking the truth. But when he confidently made a request, he was met with neither soft nor hard rebuff. This made Mo Jingli lose face. Mu Yang, who was sitting down, saw the situation and quickly said, "Prince, young Master Chu's concerns aren't without reason. Young Master Chu is a scholar. It's inevitable that he won't be able to understand some things in a short time. There's no harm in letting young Master Chu think about it for 2 days. Presumably young Master Chu will figure it out by then." Mo Jingli nodded. He looked at Yi Li and said, "I value young Master Chu very much. I ask young Master Chu to consider it carefully. With young Master Chu's talent, it's possible that he won't become the second young Master Qing Chen." Yi Li secretly laughed in her heart. She didn't dare to think that her wisdom was comparable to her big brother's. However, the price Mo Jingli paid to win him over this time was very considerable. Who didn't know that young Master Qing Chen was a person above tens of thousands of people in the Prince Ding mansion? It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he had the power to overturn the world. As long as one was a scholar who didn't see young Master Qing Chen as a role model and a direction to strive for. However, Yi Li was sure that even if she was really Chu Junwei, she wouldn't choose Mo Jingli. Mo Shuyao had the courage and ability to tolerate tens of thousands of people, but Mo Jingli didn't. She was afraid that when Mo Jingli stood firm, the first unlucky one would be the second young Master Qing Chen. Yi Li respectfully replied, "Thank you, Prince, for your kindness. This one will consider it carefully." Mo Jingli looked deeply at Yi Li and nodded. "Okay, I will let people send young Master back to the mansion." "Thank you, Prince." Yi Li didn't refuse. She naturally understood what Mo Jingli meant. She didn't mind. Since he already knew such an important matter, how could Mo Jingli be at ease to let him leave like this? However, Mo Jingli didn't know that if Yi Li wanted to disappear from Nanjing, even if he dug 3 feet into the ground, he wouldn't be able to find her. Zhuojing and Wei Lin, who were waiting outside, saw that Yi Li went in and came out with a few guards from the Li Palace. Their faces couldn't help but change. Yi Li casually waved her hand, indicating that they shouldn't act rashly. The two immediately calmed down and stepped forward to salute. "This subordinate greets young master." Yi Li nodded and said, "Go back." "Yes, young master." Yi Li walked out of the Li Palace with her newly acquired attendants, Zhuojing and Wei Lin. But when she passed by the garden, she saw the little emperor wearing bright yellow clothes. It had only been 2 or 3 days since the last time they met, but the little emperor's thin face had become a little sallow. His pair of eyes, which always seemed to be filled with fear, became even more dim and lifeless. Everyone could see that this child didn't have long to live. Mo Suyun walked slowly in the garden. The eunuchs and palace maids following behind him lowered their heads. No one did anything. It was as long as the little emperor didn't leave their sight, it didn't matter what they did. The path in the garden wasn't very smooth. Mo Suyun seemed to see something interesting in front of him. His dim eyes lit up slightly and he ran forward. But his body was already very weak. He lost his balance and fell to the ground. But even so, the eunuchs and palace maids following behind him didn't help him up. It was as if these people had suddenly become puppets without consciousness. Chapter 9:14. It was very painful to fall from the uneven cobblestones. When Mo Siyun fell down, his 2 arms were bleeding. Tears suddenly welled up in his eyes, but for some reason they did not fall. Mo Siyun did not get up. He just lay on the ground and stared blankly at his bleeding and burning arms. A pair of white and slender hands gently picked him up from the ground. Mo Siyun blinked his eyes and stared blankly at the handsome young master in white clothes in front of him. "Does it hurt?" Yi Li squatted down and looked at the child who was at the same level as her and asked softly. Tears welled up in Mo Siyun's eyes. After a while he nodded. Yi Li sighed softly in her heart. How could she not see this child's abnormality? Compared to a few days ago, this child's reaction was much slower. When the people following Mo Siyun saw someone coming, They quickly stepped forward to stop them. This young master. The emperor should go back to rest. Yili glanced at them and smiled faintly. So you know that he is still the emperor? The palace maid who spoke paled, but she quickly recovered and said, we naturally know that he is still the emperor. So we ask young master to leave quickly. The emperor is not someone that anyone can meet. Although the palace maid's tone seemed very polite, Yili could still hear a trace of pride and emphasis on still the emperor. Obviously she was instructed to treat Emo Siyun like this. The guards behind Yili also stepped forward and wanted to ask Yili to leave. But when they knew that the prince still needed this Chujunwei, they did not dare to be too tough. Greetings to princess. While they were in a deadlock, Ying walked over with people. She glanced at everyone and asked, what are you doing? The palace maid who spoke to Yili before stepped forward and said, reporting to princess, we are following the orders of imperial concubine to accompany the emperor out to play. This young Master Chu is blocking the emperor's path and is unwilling to leave. Ying did not comment and looked at Yili. Yili smiled and said, replying to Wang Fei, this one only saw his majesty fall and conveniently helped him up. Yili lifted her sleeve, indicating that the little emperor was holding on to her and would not let go. Ying was silent for a moment, then said, young Master Chu is the prince's honored guest. Since the emperor likes him, then let him play with the emperor for a while. Why are you making such a fuss over nothing? Your Highness. But the old concubine. Of course I'll go back and explain to concubine dowager. With so many people watching, you still let his majesty fall. Are you all dead? Ying said coldly. Although these people were all loyal to the virtuous consort, they did not dare to talk back to Ying the Li Wangfei in front of outsiders. They could only shut their mouths. Yili took the medicine handed over by the guard Lin and carefully applied the medicine for Emo Siyun. She asked without turning her head, why didn't you call for an imperial physician? The person serving Emo Siyun hesitated for a moment, then turned and left. Because Emo Siyun had been holding on to Yili's sleeve, Yili could not leave for the time being. She could only carry Emo Siyun to a pavilion in the garden to sit for a while. Sitting in the pavilion with Emo Siyun in her arms, Yili looked at Yi Ying faintly and asked, do you know what the virtuous consort did? Yi Ying's expression changed and she asked in a panic, old concubine? What did the old concubine do? Yili's heart sank. Looking at Yi Ying's expression, she knew that she did not know what the virtuous consort did. Why didn't you tell Yaoji about this? Yi Ying bit the corner of her lips and said, this is not an important matter, and it has nothing to do with the Prince Ding mansion. Why would I tell her? I didn't tell her, but didn't you know? I knew, but unfortunately it was too late. Yili said. Yi Ying did not care and said, don't tell me you still want to save him? He is the emperor of the Dechu state, and you are the consort of the Prince Ding mansion. What good would it do you to save him? Yili smiled faintly and said, do you think that if Emo Jingli becomes the emperor, you will definitely be the empress? Yi Ying's face turned pale. Of course she knew that if there was no support, even if Emo Jingli became the emperor, she might not be able to become the empress. Originally she had the support of the Prince Ding mansion, but now Emo Jingli had decided to go to war with the Prince Ding mansion. You can try and tell Emo Jingli my whereabouts. See if he will be in a good mood and give you the position of empress. Yili looked at her with a smile and said. But the faint coldness in her eyes made Yi Ying's heart tremble. She bit the corner of her lips and said, I won't betray you. Betraying you won't do me any good. Emo Jingli's personality was vengeful. If she told him Yili's information, then he would definitely reveal that she was investigating for the Prince Ding mansion. At that time Yili would naturally be in trouble, but in the end she would still be the unlucky one. Not to mention, the news of her child was still in Yili's hands. Yili looked at her calmly and said, you still insist on not giving me the list? Yi Ying gritted her teeth and said, help me find my child first. Also, Yili raised her eyebrows and looked at her with interest. Yi Ying said, after Emo Jingli ascends the throne, you have to help me become the empress. King. Yili looked at her with some pity and said in a low voice, you will regret it. The people outside came in with the imperial physician. But the child kept holding on to Yili's sleeve. Yili persuaded him for a while before letting him let go of his sleeve to let the imperial physician check. Yili was speechless when she saw that the imperial physician was only half-heartedly checking on his injuries. ignoring the obvious abnormality in his condition. She stood up and walked out of the pavilion. The guards who were waiting outside immediately came forward. Yili turned her head and said, "Go and tell the Prince Regent, don't make it too ugly. It won't do any good to the prince's reputation." The guards were stunned for a moment, but one of them turned and went in the direction of Mo Jingli's study. Yili looked back at the child who was sitting at the table in the pavilion in a daze and was being tortured by the imperial physician. She turned and said, "Let's go." "Young master, the emperor." Wei Lin couldn't help but ask. They weren't heartless, cold-blooded animals. Seeing a child who didn't know anything become numb and wait for death, Wei Lin felt some pity in his heart. Yili shook her head and said, "I'm afraid the emperor doesn't have much time left." The guards who followed Yili out of the Fu looked at Yili with some surprise. They didn't expect this elegant and handsome young master to be so daring. He knew that they were sent by the prince to spy on them, but he still dared to say these words in front of them. But they didn't understand one thing. When the other party didn't care about revealing some secrets in front of you, it meant that he thought you would never reveal his secrets. And in this world, the people who were least likely to reveal secrets were the dead. After listening to Yili's words, Zhuojing and Wei Lin tacitly swept their cold gazes over the guards. A faint murderous aura flashed through their eyes for a moment. The next day, news came from the Li Palace. The palace maids and eunuchs who served Mo Siyun were all beaten to death. Hearing Zhuojing's report, Yili's hands only paused for a moment before she continued to busy herself with the matters at hand. Chapter 9:15. 2 days later, when Mo Jingli sent people to the Chu mansion again, the Chu family was already gone. Only a letter written by Chu Junwei was left, saying that although the Chu family could not be loyal to the emperor, they could not go against the flow and murder the emperor. As for the guards sent by Mo Jingli, no one saw them again. Mo Jingli was furious when he heard the news, but where could he find Yili? At this time, Yili was already deep in the mountains dozens of miles away from Nanjing City. Standing on the edge of a few small huts, Yili looked at the scenery in front of her and nodded with a smile. "It's a good place to recuperate." "Sister Li." Yungu came out of the hut and saw Yili standing outside the hut looking at her with a smile. She immediately used her qinggong to land in front of Yili. "Sister Li, how did you get in?" Yili smiled and said, "The array outside has to be wrong. Took me more than 2 hours to get in." Yungu blinked her eyes blankly and said, "But I didn't feel anyone coming in." Yili smiled and patted her pink and tender little face. "Is Big Brother okay?" "Oh, I forgot. Su Qingchen's medicine." Yungu cried out in annoyance and rushed back to the hut without caring that Yili was still behind her. She had just finished boiling the medicine when she heard a noise outside. She quickly came out to see, but almost forgot that Su Qingchen's medicine had been poured out. If he didn't drink it quickly, it would get cold. Seeing Yungu walk out of the hut with a bowl of medicine and walk to another hut, Yili raised her eyebrows and followed. "Su Qingchen, drink the medicine." Yungu walked into Su Qingchen's room with the medicine. Su Qingchen put down the book in his hand and looked at the medicine bowl in her hand and frowned. "Yungu, you really can't make these medicine into pills?" After this injury, young Master Qingchen knew that he was afraid of taking medicine. In the past, young Master Qingchen was naturally not afraid of taking medicine, but this time for more than half a month he drank medicine 3 times a day. Moreover, the pills made by Yungu were fragrant and sweet and melted in the mouth. However, the medicine that was brewed was unbelievably disgusting. Su Qingchen dared to swear that he had never drunk such a bad medicine in his life. But he had seen the prescription prescribed by Yungu. It was the most common prescription for internal injuries. Su Qingchen, who knew a little bit about medicine. Even if he added a handful of Chinese gold thread, it would not be worse than the medicine in front of him. How can that be? Although the pills are tasty and easy to store, their efficacy is much worse than those that are brewed now. Yungu vetoed his suggestion and said, "It's not a troublesome medicine that requires a lot of time. Naturally, it's better to boil it and drink it. This way your injury will heal faster." Looking at the smiling girl in front of him, Su Qingchen helplessly reached out to take the medicine bowl to his lips and drank it. Yungu nodded with satisfaction and praised, "Su Qingchen, you're the fastest person I've ever seen to drink medicine." Yungu actually knew how bad this medicine was because she had grown up drinking her father's cooking. Every time she drank the medicine she had to dawdle for a long time. Most of the people her father saved in the mountains also refused to boil the medicine with her father. Since you know it's bad, you should boil the medicine to make it taste better. Su Qingchen smiled bitterly. How can that be? Father said that the medicine that milds the taste most likely has an antidote. Yungu looked at him with a smile and said, knowing that the medicine is bad will make you less injured and less sick. Young Master Qingchen wanted to say that she was thinking too much. He only hoped that she could boil the medicine to make it taste normal. Ah, big brother, I didn't expect the famous young Master Qingchen to be afraid of drinking medicine. Outside the door, Yili finally couldn't help laughing. Su Qingchen raised his head and looked at the door. Yili stepped into the room and looked up and down. Although it was just a simple mountain hut, the furnishings in the room were only a bed, a table and 2 stools. But it was very clean. There was also a somewhat clumsy but very cute wooden vase on the table. There were 2 simple flowers in the vase. The whole room was filled with a faint smell of medicine. She then looked at Su Qingchen. Perhaps it was because he had taken more medicine than food these days, but young Master Qingchen's handsome face was slightly thinner. However, his complexion was still good. He didn't look like someone who had suffered internal injuries at all. Obviously Yungu took good care of him. Seeing Yili come in, Yungu remembered that she had left the guest outside the door. She smiled at Yili embarrassedly and said in a crisp voice, Sister Yili, have a seat. I'll go get you some tea. Thank you, Yungu. Yili smiled and sat down on the stool beside the bed. She smiled and looked at Yungu, who waved her hand and quickly went out of the hut to get tea. She's really a cute little girl. Big brother, don't you think so? Yili said with a smile. Su Qingchen smiled and nodded in agreement. She's really interesting. Yili was slightly embarrassed. It turned out that in young Master Qingchen's eyes, a little girl wasn't divided into beautiful and cute, but interesting or not. How's big brother's injury? Yili asked with concern. Su Qingchen stroked his chest and said with a smile. Although Yunji's medicine is disgusting, the effect is good. It's almost healed. Yili said with a smile. Bitter medicine cures the illness. Young Master Qingchen's handsome face, which had always been full of immortal charm, showed a rare struggle. He said with some helplessness, I feel that I'm regretting my previous decision. Yungu said that I still have to take medicine continuously for 3 months to completely recover from my internal injuries. Taking medicine for 3 months was not terrible. What was terrible was that no matter what kind of medicine was brewed by Miss Yungu, it would taste the same. There would never be a situation that was more disgusting than her medicine. Even Yungu herself could not do it because that was the limit of disgusting. With Miss Yunji's enthusiasm, she would definitely brew the medicine for him personally. Young Master Qingchen felt that he was not blessed to enjoy it. Looking at Su Qingchen's conflicted look, Yili could not help but cover her mouth and chuckle. It's really rare to see big brother like this. Yungu has good intentions. If big brother rejects her, won't she be sad? Yili's hearing, sight and smell were better than the average person. Just now she smelled the thick and strange smell from Su Qingchen's bowl outside the door. At the same time she made a decision to ask Miss Yungu to continue taking care of big brother's injury. It was really rare to see big brother like this. Looking at Yili's rare playful smile, Su Qingchen shook his head helplessly. He looked at Yili and asked, Aren't you working in Nanjing City? Why do you have time to see me today? What's the matter? Yili sighed. Big brother really has good foresight. Something has indeed happened. What's wrong? Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows and asked. Yili told him about the regent's residence in detail. Mo Jingli suddenly wanted to abolish Yili's position and become independent, which really surprised Yili. Chapter 9:16. Su Qingchen smiled and said, Li is still soft-hearted. So what if you wrote the abdication edict for him? Mo Jingli wanted to establish himself as the emperor at this time mostly because he wanted to suppress Prince Ding's manner in terms of status when they were on the battlefield. As long as the Chu family comes out to explain that there is no Chu Junwei in the Chu family, it won't be a problem. Yili smiled bitterly and shook her head, saying, Perhaps, if I wrote the edict that day, I'm afraid that right now big brother would be hearing the news of Mo Jingli ascending the throne. Su Qingchen sighed slightly and said, Mo Jingli is still too impatient. Li are you pitying that child? There's no use in pitying him. That child is already beyond cure. Even if we save him, he won't live for long. Yili shook her head and said. Although it was said that way for her to personally save a child who didn't know anything, Yili knew that she couldn't do it. Su Qingchen looked at her with some pity and said, with your and Mo Xiaoyao's personalities, I don't know how you two have lived so peacefully for so many years. In terms of nature, Yili and Mo Xiaoyao's personalities were like heaven and earth. Yili could be ruthless to bad people, but she was easily soft-hearted to innocent people. Mo Xiaoyao was different. He looked gentle, but as long as he could achieve his goal, he didn't care who he dragged into the situation. Now, with the relationship between Mo Jingli and Mo Siyun, who dared to say that Mo Xiaoyao wasn't involved in it? If Mo Xiaoyao really wanted to investigate, how could he not find out Mo Siyun's identity? It was likely that Mo Xiaoyao already guessed, so he didn't let anyone investigate. Yili smiled and said, Xiaoyao is Xiaoyao, I am me. Even if we are husband and wife, there's no rule that says we have to think the same. As long as we can understand each other, it's enough. Then how do you plan to deal with Mo Jingli? Are we just going to let him be like this? Yili smiled helplessly. Does Big Brother think that I can overthrow Mo Jingli's rule in Jiangnan in a short month? It was easy to find trouble for Mo Jingli, but to oust him from his position in Jiangnan, even if Mo Xiaoyao came personally, it would be difficult to do so in a short period of time. Su Qingchen looked at Yili with a smile. Yili, what do you plan to do? After so many years together, Su Qingchen understood Yili quite well. It was impossible for her to say that she did not intend to do anything. Yili muttered, tell Yi Ying about Mo Siyun's true identity. Li is still soft-hearted. No wonder Prince Ding is worried about you. Su Qingchen sighed. Yili shook her head and said, no, I want to bet. In Mo Jingli's eyes, his son is not as important as the throne. Big Brother, isn't Yunji's medical skills very good? Su Qingchen raised her eyebrows and said, you want Yungu to save Mo Siyun. Yili lowered her eyes and said, Mo Siyun's illness can no longer be cured with medicine. I just want him to live a little longer. I also want to see what Mo Jingli will do if Mo Siyun does not die in a short period of time. Su Qingchen nodded and said, I will ask Yungu later. What do you want to ask me? Yungu carried a pot of tea and walked in with light steps. She smiled at Yili embarrassedly and said, my family does not have any good tea. Sister Yili, please make do with this. The tea that Yungu carried was not some famous tea, but the flower tea that she made herself. The faint fragrance of the flower filled her nose. Yili took a deep breath and said with a smile, it's very fragrant. It's good that Sister Li likes it. Do you have anything to ask me? Seeing that Yili did not dislike her crude flower tea, Yungu was also very happy. Although she rarely came into contact with people, she had been to the city. Naturally, she knew that those rich people who lived in big houses looked down on these wild things. What's more, Sister Li was a high and mighty princess. If Yili knew what she thought, she would definitely introduce Zhang Baiwan to her. At least, Zhang Baiwan would never dislike Yunji's flower tea. He might even beg Yungu to provide it for free 365 days a year. Su Qingchen said, Li wants to ask you to save a child. Is Yungu willing to go? Sure. Yungu nodded and agreed without hesitation. Su Qingchen looked at her with some surprise and said, Yungu is really willing? Yungu was puzzled and said, Father said that a doctor has the heart of a parent. Why should I not be willing? Su Qingchen suddenly felt that she was tacky. Sure enough, it was not a good thing to be too scheming. Seeing Yungu and her father living in seclusion, she was used to thinking that Yunji's father did not want to practice medicine anymore because of some accident. Thank you, Yungu. Su Qingchen said with a smile. Yungu smiled faintly, you're welcome. I don't know if I can cure him. When the time comes, don't blame me for not being good at medicine. I will work hard. Su Qingchen nodded and said, in that case, I'm going to take you to find someone, right? Let's go to the city together later. Yungu nodded without objection and said obediently, I'll go and prepare something. Naturally, they could not go back to the Chu mansion. Yili stayed at Yunji's house for a night. The next day they packed up and quietly returned to Nanjing City. This time, the place where they settled down was an inconspicuous mansion in a noisy area of the city. Yili could not come back as Chu Junwei this time. In the blink of an eye, she had turned into a beautiful woman with delicate features. She accompanied her sickly brother and younger sister to Nanjing to recuperate. This place was the most prosperous and chaotic place in Nanjing City. Their group of people living in the mansion in a low-key manner naturally did not attract anyone's attention. After settling down in the mansion, Qin Feng and Lin Han personally took Yungu to the Li Palace that night and let Yungu treat Mo Suyun. At night, Yi Li and Su Qingchen sat in the study room and played chess. Yi Li slowly put down a piece and looked at Su Qingchen opposite her. She smiled softly and said, "Big brother's injury is not healed yet. Why don't you go back to your room and rest? I'll wait here for Yungu to come back." Su Qingchen shook his head and said, "It's okay. They should be back soon. I'll wait for a while and see what's going on. Try not to go out these few days. I'm afraid that Mo Jingli's people are still secretly investigating." Yi Li smiled and said, "Li knows. Big brother, don't worry. Qin Feng and Lin Han are both reliable. What's more, Yungu is also an expert. Nothing will happen to her." Su Qingchen slowly put down a piece and looked at her with a faint smile. "Who said I was worried?" Yi Li shrugged indifferently and said with a smile, "I'm a little worried." Su Qingchen shook his head and stopped talking. There was a soft sound outside the door. Soon the door of the study room was pushed open. Qin Feng and the other two walked in. Yunji's clear big eyes were particularly bright, and her small face was also red. Obviously she had never done something like breaking into someone's mansion in the middle of the night, so she was a little nervous. Yi Li pulled Yungu to sit down and poured a cup of tea for her. "Yungu, you've worked hard. Did you encounter any danger?" Yungu smiled and said, "No, Big Brother Qin Feng and Big Brother Lin Han are both very powerful. The guards of the regent's palace didn't even see us. In fact, in terms of Qinggong, Qin Feng and Lin Han might not be comparable to Yungu. But in terms of sneaking around in the middle of the night, the two of them were naturally much better than her. If Yungu, this rookie, went alone, she would have been chased everywhere." You're tuning in to the Biao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.